But to start out, having a fearful view of freedom. This is a phrase that a Republican-appointed judge used to describe Donald Trump the other day. Nebraska mom Jamie Bonkowitz filmed her interaction with Secret Service agents. They knocked on her door because of a tweet. She had tweeted that she wanted to see justice. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is going after multiple Democratic members of the House and Senate, the governors of 2 states and the mayor of Minneapolis, and any Republican who speaks out against Trump or his lickspittles. Jerome Powell, Lisa Cook, Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, Jason Crow, Chris DeLuzio, Maggie Goodlander, Chrissy Houlihan, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, Chris Christie, Jack Smith, Christopher Krebs, James Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton, Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, Miles Taylor, all being investigated or prosecuted by Donald Trump. Are we really losing our fundamental freedoms under Trump? In the article, I tell this story about back in 1994. I wrote a book on attention deficit disorder, and it's still available. It was quite the bestseller because it hit the front cover of Time magazine in June of that year. And I got invitations from literally all over the world to come and speak, and one of them was from a parents group in Singapore. And so I flew to Singapore. They put me up in a fancy hotel. I gave my speech on attention deficit disorder and reforming public schools. And one of them stood up and said, well, how do you suggest we go about reforming our schools? And my answer was, get politically active. Talk to your politicians. They're the ones who approve your budgets and things. So get out there and get active. And the room just went silent. And I'd never had that kind of a response before, It's just absolute silence, like shocked silence. And I kind of filed it away going, I wonder what this is about. That night I got to my hotel room in Singapore, and my hotel room had been ripped apart. The bed was off the frame, my suitcase was emptied all over the floor. My toiletry kit was all over the bathroom floor. All the drawers were opened. So I called the manager, or I called down to the desk, and the manager came up and he looked around and he said, oh, I'm sorry about this. I said, what happened? And he said, the police came today and inspected your room. He said, you must have said something or done something suspicious. That's the kind of country that America doesn't want to become. And that's the kind of country that Donald Trump is turning us into. We are not Singapore yet. We're not Russia, where holding a blank sign in the street gets you thrown in prison yet. We're not Hungary. We're facing, putting a Facebook post gets Viktor Orban's police to throw you in jail yet. But we're sure as hell moving in that direction. Retired Professor Barbara Wine stood outside Stephen Miller's home passing out "No Nazis in North Virginia" flyers with his picture and the slogan "Wanted for Crimes Against Humanity." 3 weeks later, she was visited by agents of the FBI, the Secret Service, and a Virginia State police officer who took her phone. And they still haven't returned it. Her lawyer said they were speaking truth to power, and that is really at the core of our Constitution. It's a principle and a right that our country was founded on. But the Trump regime doesn't care about the law or the Constitution. Washington Post reporter Hannah Nathanson reporting on Trump's corruption and reorganization of our government. So the FBI showed up at her home, took her phone, took her laptop, took her sports watch, which tells, basically everywhere she's been. They want to know who her sources are. So they're apparently, looking for the names and locations of federal employees she may have interviewed. The New York Times wrote, this is exceedingly rare, even in investigations of classified disclosures, for federal agents to search a reporter's home. A 1980 law generally bars search warrants for reporters' work materials unless they themselves are suspected of committing a crime. True, but the Trump regime doesn't care about the law. And then you got this, Republican-appointed, Reagan-appointed federal judge in Boston. He's been on the bench for more than 40 years. Excuse me. He said, pardon me. He said, I find it breathtaking that high-level officers of our government, cabinet secretaries, were conspiring to infringe the First Amendment rights of people with such rights here in the United States. He's talking about the cases of these students who were protesting Israel's bombing of Gaza. And, pardon me, He said it's fairly clear that this president believes as an authoritarian that when he speaks, everyone in Article 2 is going to toe the line absolutely. I mean, this is true, right? And then you get Stephen Miller, who posted last night about Minneapolis, quote, local and state police have been ordered to stand down and surrender. Surrender. I mentioned in the article that I spent years doing relief work in the third world. And I've had, government officials offer me bribes. I've seen people killed in front of me. I've seen children starve to death in front of me. I've been in countries where one word against the government and you are dead or in prison. And this is the direction that Donald Trump is taking us. This is the road to third world style governance that our corrupt felon of a president has put America on. I mean, he's justifying the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis. They're literally not even going to investigate it, the Department of Justice. Instead, they're going to investigate her wife. He set his rabid mobs on judges who don't rule the way he wants. He intimidates reporters. He sues news outlets to shut them up. And now he's threatening to deploy the full force of the federal government to silence dissent, criminalize protest, and punish individual speech that he finds inconvenient. He's destroying our European alliance. His buddy and mentor Vladimir Putin is benefiting. He wrote to the Norwegian Prime Minister, Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8+ wars, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. Right? This is the context in which he's saying he wants to take Greenland. I mean, he's dragging us step by step toward the sort of authoritarian state like the ones I used to work in, where loyalty, is more important than the law and fear crowds out personal freedom. He's overseeing this rapid transition of America into an oligarchy. And the problem with that, as I keep pointing out, is that oligarchy is a transitional form of government. The people rebel against the oligarchs. It inevitably happens. And then one of two things happens. Either the oligarchs lose, like they did with the Confederacy in 1865, or they retreat, the same thing as losing, like they did when FDR just crushed them in 1933 and just go back to making money, or they clamp down with an iron fist, the way that Putin did, the way that Hungary did. And that's, I think, the direction, well, if not, I think, it's obvious, it's the direction we're moving. They own the media, they've captured the courts, they've bought most of Congress, thanks to this corrupt Supreme Court decision from, Clarence Thomas, the deciding vote on whether he and any other politician could take bribes after he had been taking bribes for years. I mean, this isn't alarmism, this is a historical pattern. Oligarchies either collapse or they become tyrannies. There's no third option. So the real question is, are we going to stop this before we become Russia or Hungary? Because at that point, it's too late. We've got to stop this now. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Legacy of Secrecy, The Long Shadow of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron and me. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963 triggered cover-ups by officials, this is from the introduction, by the way, that continue to negatively impact American politics, life, and foreign policy. Legacy of Secrecy details those cover-ups and hidden investigations, many for the first time, including the reasons they were carried out under such intense secrecy. Most were spawned by John and Robert Kennedy's top-secret 1963 plan to stage a coup against Fidel Castro, a plan so highly classified that it only started to be exposed in 2005 and is finally revealed in this book. Their own confessions now show that three mafia bosses, Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante, and Johnny Roselli, were behind JFK's assassination. They used parts of the secret coup plan to kill JFK in a way that forced Attorney General Robert Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson, excuse me, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and high CIA official Richard Helms to withhold critical information not only from the public and the press, but also from each other and sometimes their own investigators. It's important to keep in mind that JFK was murdered just a year after the tense nuclear standoff during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The main goals of U.S. officials were to prevent a nuclear confrontation with the Soviets and to protect JFK's ally high up in the Cuban government, Commander Juan Almeida, head of the Cuban Army in 1963, still listed as Cuba's #3 official today. While U.S. leaders have managed to prevent a confrontation with Russia and preserve a critical ally in the Cuban government, this limited the investigation into JFK's murder, allowing the three mafia chiefs and their associates to remain free. As a result, the long shadow of secrecy surrounding both JFK's murder and the coup plan set the stage for the murder of Martin Luther King, ultimately driving two presidents from office and bringing about the murders of 5 congressional witnesses in the mid-1970s. Legacy of Secrecy breaks excuse me, important new ground in key areas, detailing for the first time Louisiana godfather Carlos Marcello's clear confession to ordering JFK's assassination. Marcello's criminal empire ranged from Dallas to Memphis, and previously secret files at the National Archives have shown that he made this confession in 1985 to an FBI informant ruled credible by a federal judge as part of a secret FBI undercover sting operation named Camtex. Exposed here for the first time, Camtex yielded Marcello's admission that he'd met Lee Harvey Oswald and set Jack Ruby up in business in Dallas. The operation also generated hundreds of hours of heretofore secret prison audio tapes of Marcello discussing his crimes, recorded using the FBI informant's bugged transistor radio. Yet the FBI and Justice Department withheld most of that information from the public and Congress for years until its revelation in this book. Carlos Marcello wasn't the only mob boss who confessed his involvement in JFK's murder to a trusted associate. Legacy also uncovers important new information about Marcello's partners in JFK's assassination, Tampa godfather Santos Trafficante and Johnny Roselli, the Chicago Mafia's man in Las Vegas and Hollywood. Shortly before their deaths, both mobsters admitted their roles in JFK's murder to their attorneys. 2 of their associates with documented ties to the secret JFK Almeida coup plan likewise confessed. Using exclusive new information supported by FBI files apparently withheld from Congress, this book names 2 of the Georgia men who paid James Earl Ray to kill the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, white supremacist Joseph Miltier and Hugh R. Spake. Miltier, who had been involved in Marcello's murder of JFK, was part of a small clique of racists in Atlanta who used Marcello to broker the contract to murder Dr. King. We document James Earl Ray's ties to Marcello's heroin smuggling operation and long overlooked evidence in FBI files linking Ray to Marcello's associate, Johnny Roselli. Finally, this book explains why Ray, while fleeing to Canada the day after killing Dr. King in Memphis, made a 400-plus mile detour south to Atlanta, where he contacted Spake to get help from Miltier. In 1979, the last congressional committee to investigate the murders of JFK and Dr. King, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, concluded, quote, that Trafficante, like Marcello, had the motive, means, and opportunity to assassinate President Kennedy, end of quote from the congressional report. The HSCA had been created in the wake of Roselli's sensational murder, but the HSCA was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. And the same was true for Trafficante and Roselli, because the CIA, FBI, and other federal agencies withheld so many relevant files. The HSCA, headed by civil rights figure Louis Stokes,
also concluded there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of Dr. King and that financial gain was James Earl Ray's primary motivation. But they were unable to determine who had paid Ray or how the conspiracy had worked because the FBI and other agencies had hid critical files. With the help of more than 24 associates of John and Robert Kennedy, backed up by thousands of recently released documents at the National Archives, many of which are quoted here for the first time, Legacy tells the full story denied to Congress and the American people, legacy of secrecy.
Large. The majority, of white men in America are MAGA now, or at least voted for Trump last time, voted Republican. And these are the ones who are like, oh yeah, whatever he does, that's just fine with me. You know, we'll put up with him breaking the Constitution. We'll put up with him, you know, raping women. We'll put up with, you know, E. Jean Carroll, etc. We'll put up with him stealing money. We'll put up with him running cons. We'll put up with him, you know, lying about his taxes. I mean, we'll put up with all that, you know, dodging the draft 5 times with bone spur. That's all good because, you know, the Republican men will tell you because we're the betas. Yes, we're the ones who are deferential to Donald Trump, and that's become the entire GOP, you know, the entire Republican Party. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "That's it, I'm out of here." She could tell which way the wind blows. And these guys, you know, these billionaires, much like Fritz Tyson in Germany back in the 30s, they think that they can control Trump. Fritz Tyson was, and by the way, they're wrong. Fritz Tyson was one of the richest guys in Germany in 1933. He was the guy who personally talked von Papen into making Hitler chancellor. And he was the guy who personally raised the first $3 million that the Nazi Party needed to basically get on the ballot that year in 33. He kind of created. And by 1939, he and his entire family fled to France to get away from Hitler because he had started saying to Hitler, no, you shouldn't be doing that. It's a violation of the Constitution. And Hitler threatened him, and so they fled to France. And of course, the Vichy French snatched him and his wife and threw him in prison or actually turned him over to Hitler. And Hitler kept him in prison until the end of the war. My dad gave me his book, I Paid Hitler, for my 21st birthday. It's now an incredible collector's item. But basically, he just laid this whole thing out. He just said, you know, this is how it worked. This is what they did with us. If you look at, you know, Russell Kirk, you know, who wrote the Conservative Mind, the kind of foundational book about American conservative politics, you know, he argues in favor of hierarchy. He argues in favor of inequality. He says it's the natural state that there be rich and poor and all this kind of stuff. But he also warned that if conservatives ever abandoned just the normal restraints that had been associated with them, the Dwight Eisenhower conservative worldview, right? Moral restraint, historical humility, institutional continuity, a deep suspicion of demagogues and mass movements. These used to be the keys to the conservative worldview. They haven't been since Trump came on the scene a decade ago. And there's little doubt that Kirk, if he were still alive, would have despised Donald Trump. So, you know, here we see now this so-called philosophy. I mean, the conservatives, the Republicans have just abandoned everything. So what do? Particularly as Democrats. Number one, Democrats need to stop treating this as a normal partisan contest. This is the rise of fascism in the United States, and we need to call it out for what it is. Number two, Democrats should relentlessly frame Trumpism not as a strength, but as a weakness. He is weakening America. He is weakening our international alliances at the behest of Vladimir Putin, and there's no doubt in my mind. He is weakening America's international alliances. He's weakening our economy. The Dow is down, what, 700 points right now. He's weakening the rule of law. He is weakening the moral and social fabric of America. Third, Democrats should invite disaffected conservatives like Joe Walsh into the Democratic Party. We need a big tent party. And I get it. I'll sit to here and criticize conservatives like John Fetterman all day long. You know, I would like some purity in my party, but hey, I'll take anybody. And fourth, the message needs to be simple. Democracy first, arguments later. You know, this is an existential moment. And then finally, we have to model the courage of our founders. We have to speak up. We have to stand up. We have to support local journalism, show up at the school board meetings, the city council, go to your local Democratic Party meetings, defend your neighbors. I mean, Trump put out this memo saying that, you know, if you don't support, if you have hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on morality, then you're a terrorist. I mean, that could be you or me. If these conservative values can be so easily discarded in favor of fear, loyalty, and power, they were never really values at all.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a minute. Stay with us. And welcome back. Martin in Seattle. Hey, Martin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Martin. What's up?
Hey, good. I just wanted to talk to you about the public banking movement in the United States as the answer to our economic turmoil that we're going to be in.
Yeah.
I am from Seattle, Washington. I'm with Washingtonians for Public Banking and also the Coalition for the National Infrastructure Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn more about it in your listers at NIB National Infrastructure Bank, NIBcoalition.com. It's been endorsed. Well, first, let me give you some history. We've had 4 national public banks in our nation's history. Most recently with FDR, as you're aware, with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. This bill mirrors that bill that was passed, but it will not have a sunset clause. But the people are behind it. It will not have a sunset clause as the 4 previous ones did. But through that, we learned that they never increased taxes. They never added to the national debt. In fact, they did just the opposite. They grew GDP, gross domestic product, anywhere between, I think, 5 and 8%, something like that. Don't quote me on that. And each time they were in operation, they added money back into the national treasury. And this is the first time I've called into your show, so I'm a little nervous. Excuse me. But I just would like to invite you to learn more about the Coalition for the National Infrastructure Bank. It's HR 5356. It has 51 endorsements, co-sponsors on the bill in this Congress. It's just been reintroduced by the great Danny Davis from the great state of Illinois. All the sponsors are Democrats. But hear me out on this. That's not due to lack of trying. Mm-hmm. The NIB Coalition is made up of all volunteers. We have no paid staff.
I'm looking at your website here. Before we go any farther, why don't you just describe what a national infrastructure bank is?
A national infrastructure bank is a bank just like any other bank. It uses the same software that any bank uses, but it wouldn't create new banks in itself. It wouldn't create, the brick and mortar banks. It would work like the state of North Dakota Public Bank does. It's been in operation for over 100 years.
Right, where the profits go to the state rather than to the stockholders.
Exactly.
So is that the essence of this, that there would be a national bank and the profits would help, fund public works?
Definitely. And what the NIB would lend to would be municipalities, tribes, any project that was for the public good. Uh-huh. It would have its own board of directors. It would be a quasi, government corporate entity. It would have its own board of directors. It would be totally transparent. It would fund the infrastructure. The National Academy for the National Civil Engineers, the national group, says that we need $5 trillion to fix all our aging infrastructure, including replacing all the lead pipes and bridges that are near collapsing and all of that.
Right, this could fund that. I get that.
Please learn more about it.
Yeah, Martin, you did a great job of describing it, and thanks for the website. NIBcoalition.com is the website. Martin, thank you.
Yes,
thanks.
And also watch the Public Banking Institute. We're coming up with a new program to get more people involved. I'd like to talk to you about it more at a later time when we make it.
That's all good, Martin. Thank you very much. It's 19 minutes past the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capital Switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. You know, corporate raiders, when they acquire a company, basically strip it down. They take everything of value out of it, put it in their own pockets, leave just a husk of a company. I watched, Bain Capital do this with Clear Channel. In fact, they just ran it into bankruptcy, and they run off with all the cash. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing to America right now. He's basically behaving like a corporate raider, taking, all the assets of this company and handing as many of them as possible off to billionaires and shutting down programs that benefit average working class people. This is, an all billionaire cabinet, or largely billionaire cabinet, with a billionaire president, and they're dancing to the tune of the billionaires. It shouldn't surprise us, I suppose, but there's a whole article about it over in my Daily Take entitled "Trump's Hostile Takeover of America, the Corporate Raiders' Final Heist," over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
They wrap fear in a Bible called money divine, sold power as virtue, drew the crooked line, said order was freedom, said silence was grace, put a flag on a lie, a crown on his face.
They preached about values, but never the cost. By the time they woke up, the country was lost.
Was it conservative values or lie dress clean?
Handshake with fear behind the American dream.
They bowed to a bully called cowardice law. Now the truth's on trial and the crowd wants more. Yeah, was it conservative values or the lie that made Trump possible?
They said just one day, said we're still in control.
But a man without conscience always takes the whole.
Principles faded when courage ran dry, and loyalty lived while the Constitution died.
Fear don't build nations, it only builds strong. And every strong man leaves bodies and bones.
You can't ride the tiger, you can't cheat the flame. History's watching, and it remembers names.
It wasn't strength it won, it was silence and greed.
A cult of one man and the cowards who agree.
If values mean nothing but power and fear,
And don't act surprised how we ended up here.
yeah, it wasn't conservative values.
23 minutes past the
It
hour.
was a lie that made
Donald Trump is really unhinged. World leaders, I mean, one of Europe's leaders, this morning just came right out and said, this is a turning point for America, essentially, that will the American people put up with an American president doing Vladimir Putin's bidding and destroying the North Atlantic Alliance? Will the American people put up with their president destroying an 80-year-long alliance that has kept the world at peace just because Vladimir Putin told him to, or because he thinks that somehow he needs to have Greenland? I mean, Trump went on an overnight posting spree last night. He's doing this every night. Robert Reich is calling this sundowning. This is a common characteristic among people with early-stage dementia. Is, they're fine during the day, but when the sun goes down, when they get a little tired, they start losing their minds. And that's clearly what's going on here. It's just, retweeting screenshots of private conversations with Emmanuel Macron and Mark Rutte. I mean, this is just This is something that you just don't do. And now the Wall Street Journal editorial board, their official, I mean, these are the official representatives of, for God's sake, a billionaire Australian right-wing family that built their fortune on racism and trashing black American GIs in Australia in the World War II. This is their people saying, wait a minute, he's gone too far. The article says, you know, Trump's weekend tariff spree against European allies underscores again why his abuse of his authority needs to be reined in. He cited no legal authority for doing so. He simply said he's imposing the tariffs. He's likely using IEPA, the International Emergency Powers Act, Economic Powers Act. But what emergency, writes the Wall Street Journal editorial board? What emergency? Greenland isn't under threat of invasion. Denmark has said the U.S. can have more or less free run of the island for defense purposes. The only observable emergency is the threat to the NATO alliance that Trump's demands and tariffs are creating, writes the Wall Street Journal editorial board. And then they beg the Supreme Court to intervene. Mr. Trump's abuse of the taxing power cries out for a Supreme Court correction. Writes, again, I mean, this is nuts. Meanwhile, Canada is prepping for a hypothetical U.S. military invasion for the first time in 100 years. The Globe and Mail, they're, you know, kind of the New York Times of Canada, the Toronto newspaper, above the fold, outlined this strategy modeled by Canadian Armed Forces. They're expecting that the United States would take Canada in a week or two, and then what happens is the Canadians start a siege, the way that we did against the British, you know, like shooting from behind trees, guerrilla warfare. And Jenny Kerrigan, the chief of the defense staff, has announced plans to create a 400,000-plus strong reserve force of volunteers who would then engage in this guerrilla warfare against the United States if we took their country. This is amazing stuff that they even have to think like this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So what say you? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Talk Media for the rest of us. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is A History of the World in 6 Plagues, How Contagion, Class, and Captivity. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is A History of the World in 6 Plagues, How Contagion, Class, and Captivity Shaped Us from Cholera to COVID-19. Book was published in March of this year. This is from the prologue. I rarely enjoy, and it's by Edna Bonhomme, B-O-N-H-O-M-M-E. I believe that's how it's pronounced. She writes, I rarely enjoy an entire night of rest without interruption. I fixate on the whorls of brass on a light fixture or a stray fly. Like many insomniacs, my angst has an origin story. It began when I was a child and is bound in my memories like a cankerous sore. In the summer of 1988, after nearly a week of high temperatures and perennial diarrhea, my parents, both in their early 20s, took me in desperation to Jackson Memorial Hospital, the same public infirmary in Miami where my mother would later work as a janitor. After a series of tests, I was diagnosed with typhoid fever. I spent a month there at 4 years old, lonely and scared, curled up small in a hospital bed that felt huge. The stale air wafted through my nose while the EKG machine rattled through the night. I heard the buzzing of the fluorescent lights as the stiffness of the bed pressed up against my body. Unable to swallow without feeling nauseous, I could barely eat. According to my aunts and parents, I nearly died. Hyperbole is a familiar register for my elders, their dramatic tales making for entertaining family gatherings. But for once, their alarm at my sluggishness and flushed skin made sense. I was seriously ill. Unmoored from myself with a deep headache, my throat burned and my cough echoed throughout the room. When my relatives visited me, I skulked along the ward corridors, dragging my tiny legs slowly from the bedroom into the playroom. But the worst part was that when the nurses arrived with my favorite fruit, mango, I barely touched the plate. Instead, I glared at them with repulsion and at every other nutrient with irritation as I crumbled into a state of fatigue. What had started as a fever turned into a curse that my miniature body, mind, and spirit could no longer bear. My hospitalization stretched on primarily to get me to a place of health, but also to ensure that I could not infect others. I lost weight. As each day turned into night, I heard the sounds of the nurses as they moved around, shaken. My decline, my high temperature, and eventually my progress were left to the staff. Most of the time, they confined me to the bed in the room, unable to move as I pleased or join the games of my friends who I could see in the playground in my mind's eye. In my confinement, I felt like I was outside of myself. This month of hospitalization has had a life of its own in the years afterward. In the early hours of the morning, as I am laying in bed, the early memories of captivity returns. I am reminded of the waves of tears that flowed down my when my parents would leave, and the sense of being trapped. When one is bedridden with a life-threatening disease or a chronic illness, one might find oneself obsessed with death. I was too young to understand the cause or nature of my condition, but had a sense that death was something foreboding, a darkness hanging over me. Restless, I craved climbing the coconut tree in our backyard and searching for ladybugs and my cousins. My fear was driven by the conviction that I would not wake up the next time I closed my eyes. More than my parents' embraces and promises of safety muttered in Creole, or the icy ball of the nurse's thermometer, the hospital bed was the most consistent thing I felt. The details of this period are less significant than the impact it created, how 3 decades later I feel irrevocably out of place when entering a hospital. I absorbed the hushed voices, the pastel-colored walls, and the Spartan hospital gowns. I could hear the doctors' voices, but could not understand what they were saying. The syllables rattled through the air, meaningless sounds. Barely able to articulate my thoughts in either Creole or English, I was a callow girl lost in a room of tubes and bright lights, obsessed with my plans to escape. I couldn't see past my hospital bedroom, my mom, in the sense that my restraint was my punishment for pushing a friend off the slide, as I recall doing in my local playground shortly before I was taken ill. All I could do was count the number of times my parents came per day, or the moments the nurses came to feed me. I had no control over anything, what I ate, where I went, when I moved. Even when I imagined playing with my friends at the beach or pictured the sugarcane stalks in our backyard, my thoughts were dimmed by the atmosphere. When others entered the room, even my family, I felt they were surveying me, taking the measure of the bed, the equipment, and my body. Now I find that a bed, even when lying next to a friend or lover, is also a place of unease. Will they disappear in the middle of the night once I'm asleep, or will their presence comfort me? For months after my infection with typhoid fever, I felt the profound injustice of being forced indoors and restrained, unable to feel the humidity, the humid, heavy Miami wind blowing on my face, or watch the luxury sailboats with sunburned passengers splash across the calm water of Biscayne Bay. I learned how to sit still with my thoughts. Even today, hospitals agitate me, not because of their stiff chairs or drab walls or even their bland art, but because of my dread. Medical institutions remind me of my most profound envy for people who can sleep a whole night without interruption or harm. In the late 19th century, typhoid fever was one of the most prevalent diseases in America. When Mary Mallon, popularly known as Typhoid Mary, was identified as the asymptomatic carrier of the disease, physicians believed she had infected families in New York City for whom she cooked. The book is A History of the World in 6 Plagues. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. So Donald Trump just retweeted this post. This is insane. I mean, this actually summarizes what's really going on. I keep telling you this. I've been saying this for years now. Donald Trump is acting on behalf of Vladimir Putin. Now, we can speculate about why, but the reality of this is pretty indisputable. This just a little bit ago, he tweeted He retweeted Bobby D's post, quote, "So at what point are we going to realize the enemy is within? China and Russia are the boogeymen, when the real threat is the UN, NATO, and this religion." I put religion in quotes because it's not a religion, it's a cult. Yeah, I went there. I'm assuming by religion he's talking about democracy. I'm not sure, but Trump just reposted that. Meanwhile, ICE busted into a guy's house in Minneapolis. They said they're looking for a sex offender. The nearest registered sex offender was 2 blocks away. He's an immigrant to the United States, a Laotian immigrant, but he's got his U.S. passport. I mean, he's a naturalized U.S. citizen. He was in the shower. They dragged him out of the shower soaking wet, let him put his underpants on, but that was it. Threw a blanket over his shoulder and walked him out with flip-flops on his feet into the ice and snow in Minneapolis. The officers, quote, trashed the place, handcuffed him, put a gun to his daughter-in-law's head, did not allow him to put on proper clothing, forced him outside in freezing weather. ICE drove him around for nearly an hour, this is from Reuters, questioned him and fingerprinted him. Only after all of that did they realize they had no criminal history and had no reason to be detained. Then they dropped him back off at his apartment like nothing happened. It was incredible. His niece, excuse me, his daughter-in-law says, this is a grandfather, says no family should experience this, no child should witness this, and no U.S. citizen should be treated this way. And nothing will happen, because this administration does not respect the law, does not respect the Constitution, and is trying to rule this country by fear and fear alone. So what say you? Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's up?
I wish I was for him.
Oh, Jessica, your phone is breaking up. Let me put you on hold and come back to you. Yeah, we'll have. I'm beginning to wonder if maybe there's a problem on our end. We're going to have our engineer Chase look at this. Sean will send him a note right now. You want to try again right now?
Sure. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah. It so far so good.
Oh, when I talked with Mateo, it was good.
Yeah.
I want to remind people to call senators and congressmen. And Kristi Noem has been illegal from the very start. A Republican judge ruled that she needed to bring back the 200 immigrants she left to rot and die in El Salvador.
Right.
And she is so emboldened. She poses for pictures in front of them, the porn photos with them half naked. That's illegal. She needed to bring them back. And then let your Senate and Congress know how ICE is angry, brutal, violent, and 80% of Americans don't want them. And Tom, I woke up from a nightmare of ICE shoving my face in the snow. And when I woke up, I realized that's nothing compared to what these poor people go through.
Yeah.
That's nothing. And then the strange thing, my cousin called me this morning, and she said I couldn't fall asleep because I can't believe what America's going through. I can't believe all this horror.
Yeah.
So I even called Republican senators. I called Senator Cassidy, and I said, do the honorable thing. Do the honorable thing on your way out, and don't fund ICE. And then I called to I thanked Senator Maxwell and Senator Chris Murphy, because they're standing strong. Yeah. I thanked Dan Goldman, and I told them all, discuss it amongst all Congress and senators. Then, of course, I called Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer, and I told them to be strong. Honestly, this is not America. We have to get rid of them. They deny law. They're brutal, angry, nasty. They're killing us, literally killing us.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is we need to impeach Noem and Trump and frankly, the whole bunch. They're also in defiance of the Epstein law. I mean, you know, it's been a month now since they were supposed to release all these documents, and now they're saying, sorry, we're just not even going to respect the law anymore. They've filed papers with the court saying that this law is unenforceable. It doesn't have enforcement provisions in it, which is true. It does not have enforcement provisions in it. We just assumed that if Congress passed a law, that the Trump administration would follow the law. Turns out that was a stupid assumption. So, Jessica, thank you.
They say their names on the Congress floor, say the names, the people that are accused.
What do you mean?
Senator Massey and O'Connor both said that they would go on the floor of Congress and say the names. Maybe it's time to do that.
Oh, say the names of the billionaires that are in the files? Yeah.
Yes, two of them are on Trump's cabinet.
Oh, God.
Maxwell even said that. Maxwell said that to Blanche,
right.
And then he went on to another question quickly. She said, "Oh, two of Trump's cabinet, no Epstein and our, you know." She was alluding to that fact that they're on it.
Yeah, well, she might have been referring to Lutnick, who lived next door to Epstein, although he claims that he was disgusted by him and didn't interact with him. But yeah, we just need to find out. I mean, you know, this is a crime right in front of us, and they're covering it up in real time. It's amazing. Jessica, thank you for the call. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's up?
It's something about. Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
It's something about how despicable Trump is. We should have known about. And I know a lot of us did know. I know you paid attention to the fact that it only gets worse. From Nixon to Bush to Reagan to all of these right wing Confederate conservatives that believe that this country is not supposed to run the way it's running now. It's supposed to be changed to something more into their liking. The problem we have is that there's somebody waiting in the wings that's worse than Trump. And unless we decide to stand up against this lawlessness, this complete disregard for the Constitution and the laws of this country, it'll only get worse.
Yeah.
It will only get worse. And my concern is
you're
we got
absolutely
90 million people that's not paying attention, that don't care what happens until it affects them directly.
Or like this because they think that this is the force of a white nationalist administration coming down hard on brown and black people.
Yes. So the problem is you got since the 1960s the white so-called white people, so many of the white electors end up voting for this right-wing ideologue, and we continue down this path where, the power of the country for the United States. I always say people like America. Some people like America. They don't like that United States of America. They see it as different because you got to invite everybody else in the country, and people don't want that. Some people don't want to have everybody get this, be entitled to the American dream like everybody else.
Yeah.
They don't want to be, they don't want them to get it. So if we can just get enough of us, you know what I'm saying, to really pay attention and get into what's going on in this country. Instead, I'm still, my mind is still blown that 90 million people didn't even participate. That's more people than voted for either one of the candidates.
Right, in the last election,
Yeah.
Well, that's always been happening, Tyrone. But I get you. I absolutely get your point. And there is a great awakening happening. And frankly, I think that ICE's excesses are helping to drive that. And Trump's insanity around Greenland. He's just lost it. He's gone over the edge. Tyrone, thank you for the call. David in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, David, thanks for listening to WGRN. What's up?
Hi. I was impressed by your comment that the Democrats need to consider this as more than just a typical election.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're doing. That's the communication I get every time I get a letter to contribute. That's the feeling I get. It's just another election, and we got to get rid of Trump because he's a bad president, not because he's an insane maniac. And I think there's certain Democratic leaders that are showing leadership, like Bernie, Ro Khanna, Merkley, some others, and Ro Khanna specifically has a group he's creating that's not going to take money from corporations.
Right.
That's a good direction to go, and I think that shows leadership. And it's a breakaway from what's been happening in the past.
Yeah.
And I'd like to communicate that I support that to my Democratic leaders. And I already did that. I called them and I told them to support this, but I need to do more of that.
Yeah, it's called
It's
called the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the CPC. And to become a member, you have to basically say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to take corporate money. And there's about 100 members. So, you know, it's a good chunk. It's about half of the Democratic Party right now, which is a good start. So, David, that's where I'd focus my attention. Thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a minute. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Yep, it's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, no, the right-wingers on the Supreme Court got that one wrong too. And welcome back. Len in Pasadena, California. Hey, Len, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I'm calling to say I think the authorities in Minnesota should indict, I think his name is Anderson, Ross,
Yeah, the
murder.
cop who shot Renee Good.
Right. I don't think anybody can look at that video and not conclude that that's probable cause of murder.
Yeah, and you know, 4 bullets. I mean, you know, she was shot twice in the shoulder, twice in the chest, once in the shoulder, and once in the head. I mean, that's just like, wow, that's an execution.
Right, and you know, it's unprecedented for a state court would be indicting a federal employee, but it's also unprecedented that you have a federal government making war on a state of the United States.
Yep, it's
They're
punishment.
pulling people out of their cars and shooting people.
Yep, it's punishment for being a blue city in a blue state.
Right, and the state government has a duty to protect their citizens. I think there's no choice but to indict that guy.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Len, thank you very much. Well said. Phil in Long Branch, Washington. Hey, Phil, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Nice to hear your show today. Some really, really good points. You were just talking about the fact that, you know, the GOP, there is no policy. It's just a cult to Trump. Stuart Stevens, part of the Lincoln Project, wrote a book a couple years ago. It was all a lie. Just explains it so well. You know, how the whole idea was to just deceive people, divide and conquer, and that's what they continue to do.
And entirely for the purpose of acquiring power so that power could be used to expand their wealth.
Absolutely. That's the bottom line. And these oligarchs that we have in our country, you know, and Trump, they're willing to divide the world up. You know, we'll each have our own sphere, and, you know, we'll do what we can, everything to keep ourselves in power. If we buy elections, so what? But Stephen Miller, by his own admission, might is right.
Yep.
You can't beat that.
Yep.
You know, you can go with the picket sign, but, you know, they've created a gunfight, and we're bringing water balloons.
I get it. I totally get it, and I don't disagree. Well said, Phil. Thank you very much. Raven in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Raven, what's up?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
So I was, you know, and I know people are going to get really offensive when I say this, and there'll be a lot of those who don't really know history that well. It's not so much a matter of political parties or anything else. It's that Americans, and not all white Americans, because I look at white supremacy as a matter of consciousness, because you have those who pursue proximity to whiteness, knowing the deal they're making.
Yeah.
And basically, if you look at Jamestown, that first decision that came down when collectively white, black, indigenous, slave, indentured all decided to rise against the power structure.
Yeah.
And how whites at that point in time decided to make the first deal with evil. We get to be indentured, you get to be slaves.
Yep.
Same with Reconstruction.
Yep.
Another deal with evil. On and on and on. And but you keep making deals with evil for privilege, position, wealth, power.
Yeah, and eventually it comes back on you. I mean, this is Pastor Niemöller's poem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Raven, thank you. You said it very, very well. I appreciate the call. We'll be back in 1 minute. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Minutes before the hour, picking up your calls. Well, actually, John Parker is on the line with us. He's a reporter for AM 950 KTNF in Minneapolis, our Minneapolis affiliate. Hey, John, what's the status of life in Minneapolis and St. Paul today?
Hi, Tom. So I just got done watching a press conference that just concluded with law enforcement leaders. And I have to say, I've never seen anything like it. So some of the folks that were participating were the Hennepin County Sheriff Witt, Brooklyn Police Department Chief Bruley, and the St. Paul Police Department Chief Henry. And they basically listed out a number of things that I can't believe that they were talking about how they don't even know who to talk to with complaints. They said there are so many different federal agencies here in the Twin Cities that aren't talking to each other. So they'll call one area and say, well, that's not us. You got to talk to another area. And then that other area will say, well, go to the website and file a complaint there. It just seems chaotic the way they were describing it. They blatantly said that ICE is acting unconstitutionally. An example they gave is traffic stops. They said that ICE cannot be doing traffic stops. It is illegal, unconstitutional for federal agents to be doing that. And I just thought it was really striking that they used the word unconstitutional here in describing ICE activity. They said that they are completely overwhelmed with calls about their residents talking about their constitutional rights being violated. Interestingly, they also claimed that it is a, quote, small group of agents who are engaging in this behavior. And they said it wasn't until a couple weeks ago when there was the surge that happened of all these additional thousands, frankly, of agents that they started seeing this type of unconstitutional behavior as they're characterizing it. There wasn't a lot of pushback on that except, to say, well, folks were asking, is this coming from the top down? Like, do they believe that this behavior is they're instructed to be doing that? Brooklyn Police Chief Bruley said that he wasn't seeing that. He wasn't aware of that. He believes it's a small group. But, that kind of contrast with what we see from the Bavino, the head border security chief, who was found in an amazing investigative report.
Yeah. John, I'm curious, you have a church there in Minneapolis where the pastor's, apparently it's a MAGA church. The pastor is a field officer for the local ICE group, and some protesters showed up and interrupted their services, and now the Trump administration is talking about prosecuting the protesters. What do you know about this?
That is pretty much as we know right now. It happened on Sunday morning. The church is in St. Paul, Minnesota, and a few dozen protesters went in there specifically to that church because of, like you said, that pastor is working deliberately with ICE. Folks the parishioners rather are upset about it, because they like their pastor, and they're saying that their rights have been violated to worship, which, we'll see what the law does about that. But, we've seen here, that happened, the announcement that they were going to investigate those protesters on the very same day that they said that they were not going to proceed with any type of investigation into Jonathan Ross, even though we found out yesterday they a probe and they found there was enough evidence to justify an investigation into Ross. They shut that down, announced that on the same day they said they're going to go after these protesters.
Yeah, so this is another cover-up, just like the Epstein files. They're covering up the murder of Renee Good. They're covering up Donald Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and trafficking, teenage girls. It's just astonishing. And they're covering up, whatever these bruises on the back of his hands. What's the deal with this? Is he really like like Lev Parnas says? Is he really taking this, anti-Alzheimer's drug? I mean, and Greenland? I'm ranting here, John. I'm sorry. Back to you. What else is? Yeah, you had this press conference this morning. This is interesting, but it sounds like there was no action steps that came out of it.
So one thing that they were telling protesters specifically is they said, we're seeing too many videos of protesters attacking or verbally abusing the officers, like Brooklyn Park PD, St. Paul PD, Minneapolis PD. They're like, they are there to protect you from and to create a barricade, between you and the ICE agents. So they did have a call to residents to say,
don't pick on our cops.
Stop. Yeah, go after the ICE agents. We'll see how that goes, given that the unions are so very clearly on the side of ICE, at least in their statements. Originally, after the murder of Renee Nicole Good, they came out in support of Jonathan Ross. So I'll be very curious to see how the unions respond to all of these police chiefs saying that how ICE is acting is unconstitutional. I mean, just wild stuff here. To see that today. We also have the walkout, the Day of Freedom and Truth. That's this Friday. A number of folks, unions that are involved, a number of businesses are already shutting down, where the idea is to no work, no school, and no shopping. And they're asking a number of businesses to become what they're calling Fourth Amendment businesses, which is not only shutting down on Friday, but they're asking that business to commit to denying entrance to ICE unless there is a signed judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant, and also to train all of their staff on their constitutional rights when it comes to search and seizure. There will be a protest in downtown Minneapolis, at 2 p.m. on Friday. So we'll see what happens with that. But already dozens of businesses are shutting down. We've got national nonprofits organizations that are advising nonprofits about how they can participate without jeopardizing their 501c3 status. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens on Friday.
Also, apparently a bunch of schools are shut down today in Minneapolis just because of ICE activity. John Parker.
That's just St. Paul College, actually.
Not St.
Paul College. St. Paul schools are shut down for training to start their online learning.
I see. Okay. John Parker with KTNF AM 950 in Minneapolis. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Today's book in our book club is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, by this guy, Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using three simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race. or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for brown Arab in GOP speak, and immigration, aka brown people from south of our border, and socialism. Meanwhile, Republican secretaries of state across the nation are vigorously purging voters from the rolls. Over 17 million, more than 10% of America's active voters, in just the 2016-2018 period, according to NBC News. After the, after the 5 Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, 14 GOP-controlled states moved within a year, some within days, to restrict access to the vote, particularly for communities of color, students, and retired people. In North Carolina, for example, 158 polling places were permanently closed in the 40 counties with the most African-American voters just before the 2016 election, leading to a 16% decline in African-American early voting in that state. An MIT study found that nationwide, Hispanic voters wait 150% longer in line than white voters, and black voters can expect to wait 200% longer in line to vote. In Indiana, then Governor Mike Pence's new rigorous voter ID law caused an 11.5% drop in African-American voting. Students are suing for their right to vote, and retired people who no longer drive but care passionately about their Social Security and Medicare are being turned away at the polls by the hundreds of thousands because their driver's licenses have expired. The obvious failure of 40-plus years of Reaganomics and GOP policies to maintain a functional middle class in America has been a problem for the modern GOP. In 1974, for example, the GOP had outright control of only 7 states. The message, elect us and we'll help the rich people, just didn't generally resonate with American voters. It's the reason why, outside of the fluke elections of 46 and 52, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives outright for 3 generations, from 1933 to 1996, and controlled the Senate for most of that time. Desperate to win the presidency for the GOP in 1968, Richard Nixon went so far as to commit treason by torpedoing a peace deal with President Lyndon Johnson that President Lyndon Johnson had worked out with the North and South Vietnamese. According to Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, then president of Iran, Ronald Reagan did the same thing by cutting a deal with Iran whereby they would hold on to the U.S. embassy hostages until after the 1980 presidential election, torpedoing Jimmy Carter's chances of re-election. But in 2000, the GOP changed tactics. After Reagan was almost busted for his part in Iran-Contra, he testified that he had forgotten about details of the program more than 80 times. His growing Alzheimer's spared him an indictment. They realized that getting busted for treason wasn't worth the risk. They needed a plan B, and it was deliciously simple. If most voters don't like what you're selling, then just don't let them vote. Paul Weyrich promoted this idea back in 1980 when he was campaigning for Reagan after co-founding the Heritage Foundation. And indeed, many Republican luminaries, such as William Rehnquist, who went from serving the GOP by standing in polling places and intimidating Hispanic and Native American voters in the 1960s, to becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, rose up through the ranks by participating in Republican-run voter intimidation schemes. Voter suppression became the foundational go-to tactic for the GOP in 2000. Although the GOP attacked Democratic presidential nominee Al Gore with smear and innuendo, ridiculing him for helping write the legislation that created the modern internet, for example, the main thing that got George W. Bush into the White House was voter suppression. His brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Bush's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, threw somewhere between 20,000 and 90,000 African-American voters off the rolls. They were able to get the vote close enough that 5 Republican appointees to the Supreme Court functionally awarded Bush the presidency. The BBC covered this in 2001 in 2 major investigative reports that were seen all over the world, except on any American media. By 2016, the Republican Party had fine-tuned its voter suppression and intimidation systems to the point that they ran like well-oiled machines in nearly 30 states. Between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, for example, Ohio had purged more than 2 million voters from its rolls, the vast majority, more than 2 to 1, in heavily African-American and Hispanic counties. The 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court ruled in 2017 that they could keep it up. And other states have since adopted their new tactic of caging voters. The book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, by me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the second hour of our program. You might have heard of Gabriel Zucman. I've talked about him a number of times over the years. Zucman is how he spells his last name. He's a French economist and well known. He's got a Substack newsletter, but he's probably most well known for his work on inequality. He's been around for a while, and I believe he's co-authored several books on this. But he wrote in his Substack newsletter this week, and this is really, I think, quite extraordinary. He has a solution for Europe to deal with Donald Trump. And basically his solution is, don't mess with Americans and don't mess with America. Focus your efforts on, hurt American billionaires exclusively. Here's a quote. Quote, Europe should respond to Trump's blackmail with targeted measures aimed not at American consumers, but at American billionaires. Access to the European market by billionaires and the companies they own should be made conditional on paying a wealth tax, in effect, a tariff on the oligarchs. If Elon Musk, for example, wants to keep selling Teslas in Europe, he should have to pay it. If he refuses, Tesla would lose access to the European market. This, of course, is in response to Donald Trump threatening, saying that he's going to impose a 10% tariff on the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, and that on June 1st, that will rise to 25% tariffs if they don't give him Greenland. He goes on to say, Zucman goes on to say that anti-oligarchic protectionism, and again, this is protectionism, as it were, the equivalent of a tariff. He's calling it for a wealth tax, focused on oligarchs exclusively. Anti-oligarchic protectionism has a decisive advantage. It opens a two-front struggle against Trump, both at home and abroad. By targeting oligarchic wealth rather than national pride, Zucman notes, Europe can blunt Trump's ability to mobilize nationalist resentment and rally part of the American public behind his imperial agenda. He means against his imperial agenda. And so basically what he's saying is, Germany and France and whatnot, if you impose tariffs on American goods coming into Europe, you're going to hurt a bunch of small American manufacturers, you're going to hurt American employees, you're going to hurt the American economy, and the United States is going to get pissed off at you. But if instead you say any American billionaire who has business interests in Europe, if he wants to continue pursuing those business interests, he's going to have to start paying a wealth tax. Not only will Americans not be hurt by that, they'll probably be delighted by it. Yes, we know our billionaires, our oligarchs don't pay their damn taxes. I mean, you look at the ProPublica report from 3 years ago that the average billionaire in America is paying around 3% income taxes. How do they do that? Well, they do what you and I can't do. Say you're sitting on $1 billion in assets, and you want to take, $1 million a week as your pay. But instead of taking $1 million a week as pay, what you do is you take $1 million, every week you borrow $1 million, ideally from a bank that you yourself own, so you end up paying the interest to yourself, but not always. You borrow the $1 million, and you live off that, and you don't have to pay any income tax on it. And then it's a bizarre way but it works. So anyhow, Casey Michael is a journalist who writes for the New Republic, as do I. And he said this constituency stands to benefit massively from U.S. takeover of the mineral-rich Greenland territory. Who is that? Who is the constituency that will benefit if we steal Greenland? American billionaires, Trump's top campaign donors. I mean, this is what Michael writes. He says, ranging from tech moguls to fossil fuel company heads, all of these figures and forces have invested in mining and extracting companies across Greenland, and all stand to profit if only they can cut out any pesky Danish or Greenlandic authorities from regulating or restraining their operations. You get this? There's a bunch of billionaires associated with Donald Trump. I mean, we talked about Paul Singer at some length on the program. You know, Greg Palast talking about that, but it's not just Paul Singer. There's a bunch of billionaires who have been buying companies or investing in companies specifically to operate mining operations in Greenland or data operations where you use the glaciers to cool your computers. Michael writes, the figures behind the curtain are by no means obscure. Kobold Metals, a mining operation helping lead Greenland's modern gold rush, has seen investment from figures like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and hedge funds like Andreessen Horowitz. Another company eyeing Greenland, he writes, is Critical Metals Corp., which is backed by the same hedge fund that Howard Lutnick, now Trump's Commerce Secretary, spent years running. So you've got billionaires in Trump's cabinet who have already invested in Greenland. You've got other billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos investing in Greenland. And those investments will not cash in. They won't make big bucks unless the United States controls Greenland. This is crazy. Zuckman, Michael adds another... I shared that with you. Zuckman writes, if imperialism is drawn by oligarchic power, then oligarchic power must be confronted. What are the alternatives? Doing nothing invites endless blackmail. And then comes Dean Baker. He's the co-founder of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. And he writes, quote, European countries can announce they will no longer honor U.S.-owned patents and copyrights. Putting U.S. patents and copyrights on the line is a guaranteed attention grabber. The vast fortunes of the sleaze buckets who put Trump into the White House and back his attack on democracy in the United States and around the world will suddenly be thrown into question. He said the key point is that European countries, by opting to not respect U.S. copyrights and patents, have an incredibly powerful weapon to use against Donald Trump and his rich supporters. The time has come for them to go nuclear. Well, that's going to be interesting. I mean, frankly, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Meanwhile, all across America, people are seeing their health insurance premiums explode because the Republicans in Congress refused to renew or continue the ACA subsidies, the Affordable Care Act subsidies. So Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, came out and announced to reporters that, first of all, Trump came out. This was, last week. Trump came out and said, I've got a health care plan. It's going to be wonderful. Lower drug prices, lower hospitalization costs. We're going to give you money for your health insurance, quack, quack, quack. But there were no details. So Oz finally comes out and says, yeah, it's not really a plan. It's actually a broad framework. Those were his words. Trump says, it's going to be tremendous. We're going to have tremendous reductions. As you know, if you look at medicines and prescription drugs, they're going to come down by numbers that have never been seen before. It's one of his favorite phrases, right? Never been seen before. Yeah. It's been 20 years now or almost 20 years since Obamacare was passed. And in that period of time, the Republicans have tried to repeal it, 50 times, roughly? And they keep saying that they've got something to replace it. They've got nothing. Obamacare was the Republican plan. It was created by the Heritage Foundation back in the 1980s in response to Jimmy Carter and others who were pushing to have a national health care system. And they said, well, yeah, okay, let's have a national health care system, but let's make sure that most of the money runs through private for-profit entities. The big corporations that give big donations to Republican politicians. And now here we are. The Republican plan is failing because it has been kneecapped by Republicans on the Supreme Court who said, oh, no, you can't have a mandate to buy insurance. And so it doesn't cover everybody. And now Republicans in Congress who are saying, well, and we're not going to fund it. You want to have something that, provides health care to all Americans? Good luck, buddy. Don't ask us to pay for it. Billionaires have their own health insurance. They don't give a rat's ass. They don't even need health insurance, period. I mean, this is just... What are we supposed to do? Well, I think we're supposed to elect Democrats and get a national health care system into place and do it quickly. 16 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what say you? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. And as just a reminder, at the top of the next hour, we're going to be speaking with Miles Taylor. Stay with us. And welcome back. And Paul in Ambler, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Just to follow up on what you just said about the various billionaires who are investing in the minerals and the processing of it. Just this week, Elon Musk built and now went operational with the very first lithium refinery plant in the United States. We could have all the lithium in the world, but we have to ship it to China to get refined. Not anymore.
Well, that's
the largest, most technologically advanced lithium refinery is operating in Corpus Christi, Texas, which just happens to be the state headquarters of Tesla, and it's part of the supply chain. No longer will Elon Musk have to rely on the Chinese for batteries, for lithium, or for the processing of lithium.
That's interesting.
So this is part of the reshoring program of bringing the factories all here in the supply chains, all here to America, or all here to Texas, I guess. They want to shove America into Texas.
Yeah. Well, I can't condemn that, Paul. I mean, that's reasonable business.
I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying it connects to what you're saying. Why do they want Greenland? You can condemn Greenland because Greenland's going to be the source of the ore that's going to be refined in Corpus Christi.
Yeah, there is lithium. There are large lithium deposits in Greenland. We know that.
Exactly. Well, moving on from that, what I really wanted to talk about, was the growing reaction to the Trump's regime setting up a police state. The social sciences has a long body of evidence pointing out that people will resist massive changes to their lives. And we've all heard this is a threat to our American way of life. Well, Donald Trump and everything that he's doing with ICE is a massive attack on our American way of life. And this goes back to Machiavelli. And he pointed out that if people that are used to their liberties, they do not give them away because of a new prince coming in with a law or command of his own. It's like telling people this, all right, today you've got to stop speaking English. We're socialized to behave and think and act in a certain way. We can't change overnight. Renee Good wasn't doing anything unusual. What was unusual was the institution of a police state. The problem is this is a very large country. The amount of people it would take to re-socialize everybody, to bring us to our knees, is beyond the capability of Trump and all the billionaires put together.
I agree.
There was a saying about East Berlin. Half the people in East Berlin were the police state against the other half of the people in East Berlin.
Yeah. Watch the movie The Lives of Others. A third of East Berliners were spying on the remaining two-thirds of East Berliners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People want to go to tailgates. They want to watch TV. They don't want to get arrested because they go to Target and they don't look like,
right.
Jack Armstrong or an American boy.
Yep.
They have to hit a reaction, and they're going to hit it big time
I think we're there,
more
Paul.
violence and
I got to
murder.
run, but I think we're there. Paul, thank you for the call. 20 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Between 1920 and 1980, America went from the middle class being about 10 or 12% of us up to being over 60% of us. What drove that was high taxation. High tax rates. Woodrow Wilson had 91% income tax rate. Franklin Roosevelt, 90% top income tax rate. Lyndon Johnson dropped it down to 74%. But from that, throughout that entire period of time, with the exception of the Roaring 20s, this is a brief little 10-year period, 12-year period, the top income tax rate was in the neighborhood of 74 to 90%. And what that did was it caused really rich people to leave their money in their businesses and pay their workers well, and that produced the middle class. Reagan came along and dropped that top tax rate down to 25% and then 27%, and it's now in the 30s, and that's what killed the middle class. We need to bring back these high taxes. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com. Will the morbidly rich ever go back to being good citizens? Check it out.
They say it's paperwork and process, just names and files, just rules apply. But the engine's idle in the daylight and the faces hide behind what's implied. No warrant waved, no questions answered, just hands on guns and orders barked. If this is law, then why the silence? Why the masks? Why leave the dark? So tell me, what is ICE really doing? Who is this meant to scare tonight? If it's just a law, why all the fear? If it's just justice, why the sight of doors kicked in and voices shaking, of cities told to look away? What is ICE really doing, and who decides who's safe to stay? We've seen the laws enforced before now, with forms and courts and measured tone. No armies needed, no theater staged, no lessons taught with blood and bone. They point and say that's not for you, say you're fine, you're on the right side. But power never stops with one group, it just looks for the next place to hide. So tell me, what is ICE really doing? Is this about the border or control? When fear becomes the chosen language, what happens to the human soul? If force is all they need to govern, if masks replace the rule of law, what is ICE really doing, and who are they coming for? This isn't theory, this isn't later, this isn't some...
Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. What's on your mind today? Joe in Chicago. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to go on for what you and the previous caller said about the Democrats need to act like this is not a normal election.
Yeah.
And they're just campaigning like they always do against each other, sending out their individual emails. They need to unite. These candidates in these congressional and Senate races need to work as a team.
I agree.
Just tell people, vote who do they like the best. Go with a clear platform, maybe a national platform. It's not all that different. Don't send out individual email fundraising notes every minute. Work together. Agree to work together after the primary. They have to work as a united team.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And the other thing I just want to say about this thing about, the Republicans are too scared to say what they really think. That may be true to some extent, but that's just a lifelong scam they've been running on Democrats to make them think that they kind of work with them in certain ways.
You think Mitt Romney was lying?
Well, the Republicans have said this during McCarthyism. I wish I could say what I really think. During the Vietnam War, it was always reported. They wish they could just say what they think about the war. They can't say in public what they really think.
Yeah.
I'm sure about climate change, same thing. This is just a scam that the Republicans roll in the Democrats behind closed doors and make them think like they're nice people. This is what Marco Rubio did to these, Democrats, to have them all vote for them. The Democrats got to play hardball. Stop being scammed.
Yeah.
If there are that many afraid, get together, find out who all those people are, contact all those Republicans, get them to work as a united front, to be brave, if that's really what they think.
Yeah.
There's enough of them to work as strength in numbers if they have support.
It's been amazing to me. I mean, the Lincoln Project has been calling for this sort of thing, for what, 5 years now? 6 years, 7, 8 years? I don't know when they started, but it was early in Trump's first administration. And, just basically saying, Republicans, here, look at the horrors that are going on. Just stand up, be patriots. And universally elected Republicans are like, no, we'd rather be cowards.
Right. If they really are that afraid, the Democrats could work with them to come out and be brave.
Yeah.
But I don't, and so if that's the case, the Democrats are failures at being politicians. However, I think that a large extent of it, the Republicans are just lying. They don't come out and, talk about, what really should be done.
The one reality
anything.
we have to acknowledge, Joe, is that we've got one political party that is still committed to democracy and wants everybody to vote. And you've got another political party that is committed to dictatorship and does not want everybody to vote and wants to rig the game and wants to continue taking, wealth and power from America's oligarchs, from the billionaires. Joe, thank you. Well said. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You're listening to the True People's Media. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Is a Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton,
was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Another year turns over. Same hands on the wheel. defies the laws in the dead of night. Boots hit the ground to keep order right. Pulpits hum with a holy sound, telling you heaven's on the other side of down. They shake hands behind closed doors, call it freedom, both the floors. The Trump cartel tightens its grip through wealth, force, and faith. They rule it. They wave the flag, quote God and guns, and send the bill to everyone.
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Lori.
I was listening to your story about the article about Canada bracing for war.
Mm-hmm.
And
isn't it incredible?
Thinking about Canada. No, it is. I mean, they have so much ice, and they've got the Great Lakes. But for those of us, I was born in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I came over down Great Lake, Michigan, when I was 4. And I never became a U.S. citizen. I went to a school in Wisconsin and then on to New England. When I was 26, I mean, my family traveled back and forth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 26, I went up to Ontario to visit my grandmother who was sick. And then I went back home to Massachusetts. And then I went back up to visit her a month later. And Canada wasn't having any of it. They said, look, this green card of yours belongs to us. You cannot go home. And I was feeling very stranded at the Canadian airport because I didn't know what school my uncle worked in as a shop teacher, blah, blah. And after 2 hours or whatever, talking them through it, and then, of course, talking me through it, they took my green card and gave me 1 year to become a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
Now, things have changed since then. Yeah, things have changed since then.
Uh-huh.
Now, anybody born in Canada is a Canadian citizen.
Right.
My cousins all say, Lori, come back. You can come back whenever you want. Here's the dilemma. I want to get my passport, but I don't want to send, to have any bells going off as I apply for my passport.
Your Canadian passport.
My Canadian passport, which I don't need because, by the way, Lori, I am Canadian.
Yeah.
And so I could fly on my passport because it says I was born in Canada.
Right.
But it's still probably more advantageous to have your passport, more so for people whose mothers were. Yeah, exactly. I have it. Yeah.
Well, plus
but
you might want to travel to someplace other than Canada or the U.S.
Exactly. I want it to, anywhere I travel, I want it to be with a Canadian
if
passport.
I had been born in Canada, if I was here with a green card, I would be hanging on to that Canadian citizenship. It may be a very valuable thing at some point. But I can't advise you about what to do, Lori. I just don't know.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just putting a flag out for people now that are considering these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably better to go now, to just make the application, submit it, and get it now, get it done, and have it available so that you can take off if you want to.
Yeah, well, I would say generically, always it's a good idea to have a passport, a legal passport, which in your case would have to be issued by Canada, just because you just never know. You may want to take a vacation someplace, or you may want to take a cruise someplace, or you may just need to get the hell out.
I have a U.S. passport.
Oh, you have
a U.S. passport.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
How do you have a U.S. passport without U.S. citizenship?
I have U.S. citizen. I got it when I was 26 when I came back. I had to. I'm sorry. I missed
so
that
you got
part.
naturalized.
I left that part up. Yes, I became a U.S. citizen, and I was already a citizen at heart when I was 4 years old.
But you didn't renounce your Canadian citizenship? Is that the deal? You can be a dual citizen?
The deal is, back when I became a U.S. citizen, you couldn't have dual citizenship. It used to drive me crazy.
But now you can.
People that now you can, and they say, Canadians will welcome you back.
Interesting.
Yeah, so now I can travel. But it says on my passport, born in Ontario,
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah, I would go
Ontario.
for that. Lori, I've got to move along, but good luck. And you know, you've got a problem that many of us would love to have. Lori, thank you for the call. Ed in Chicago. Hey, Ed, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, kind of following the previous call you had before the break, I just think it's really important for the Democrats to tie Trump to the Republican Party. Like you had mentioned, you said this administration doesn't believe in following the law. Anytime we say the word Trump, it should be Trump and this administration, Trump and the Republicans don't believe in following the law. Trump and the Republicans are destroying our environment. And the Republicans should be, every time you say the word Trump, it should be in every Democratic representative should say, and the Republicans. Yeah. And just pound that until the midterms that it's true. Because I think the Democratic Party is assuming that people won't that they're going to associate Trump and Republicans, and I don't think so. I think a lot of people will look at it separately. Well, I don't like him, but I've always been a Republican, that sort of thing. Yeah. And that's why I just think it's vitally important to say it's Trump and the Republicans who are going after Greenland, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
No, you're right. The whole party has become cheerleaders.
Right.
Pathetically.
And something else real quick here. I saw on Democratic Underground where Senator Diego referred to Trump as insane. Mm-hmm. And I called his office, and I've been making my round of calls saying, finally, there's a Democratic representative saying what literally the entire world knows to be true. You all should support Senator Diego and start using the word insane in reference to Trump.
Yeah, I saw that last night on, I think it was on CNN, maybe, or was it MSNBC?
Right, yeah, I think it was on CNN. I saw the clip on
yeah, and I saw it live, and he said, you know, Trump is insane, and the host was like, wait a minute, insane? Literally? And he was like, yep. Literally.
You know, yeah, and I saw that, and I was, like I said, my initial thought was, finally, it's like the emperor has no clothes. Finally, somebody is saying what literally the entire world knows to be true. Don't leave Senator Diego out there in the wind. Back him up on this. Start using the word insane when referring to Trump and Stephen Miller and those people, because it's obvious they are insane.
Yeah, this is Ruben Gallego. He represents Arizona, right, in the Senate?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Ed, thanks for the call. Thanks for the tip on that. Jan in Etna Green, Indiana. Hey, Jan, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I'd like to go back to your intro and talk about your big tent philosophy a little bit. First of all, just in my opinion, I think the Democrats need to be careful who they let into this big tent. In their quest to get the vote of the center-right, they've lost track of who their base has always been. Mm-hmm. And right now, at last count, which was Sunday, out of, 212, 213 members, Democratic members of the House of Representatives, there have been only 90 that have been willing to sign a petition to impeach Kristi Noem. Mm-hmm. There is a bipartisan effort to fund DHS. Right. Well, we didn't have a DHS prior to 2021. We existed 225 years without it. We don't need it now.
Yeah, no, it was actually, I think, 2003 or 4 that we got DHS. It was a Trump reform. A Bush reform, excuse me.
Anyway, it passed the Senate, 90 to 9. So that means that there were a lot of Democrats that voted for this. Mm-hmm. Democrats want to win. They need to go back and pick up their disenfranchised, disenchanted Democrats that have left the party or have just not bothered to vote, run on a FDR-type platform, and promise to raise taxes on the rich, and promise to give us health care for all, and promise to take the cap off Social Security so that Social Security doesn't
I'm in favor of all those things, Jan, but that said, if there's a Democrat who can win an election in, say, a red state in Alabama or Mississippi or something by running on, we like guns, You know, I'm not going to say no to that guy, or gal. This is not about policy any longer. It's about democracy or not democracy.
To Thom Hartmann.
And hang on just a second.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And the Republican Party has decided to be the not democracy party. So I'm willing to welcome anybody. Jan, thank you for the call. 45 minutes past the hour. And welcome back, Brett in Los Angeles. Hey, Brett, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to get your thought on opinion I have about ways we could push back, and it begins with giving you some big kudos for talking about ending the filibuster last fall. I think that's where so much of our problems begin, with accountability on both sides of the aisle, including our own party.
Yep.
Without the filibuster, there's a lot we could do, but there was this great article on the Daily Kos about we're already in fascism and what we can do about it, and they talk about soft secession as an idea. And I think, you know, if we stop thinking about what are we going to do in November and start thinking about what can we do now, you know, can we put pressure on some of these blue states, like my state, to engage the National Guard or take some other measures that, you know, I think Trump's ethos is, oh yeah, what are you going to do about it? And nobody's done anything about it.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
on a large, not to keep rambling, but my other point, in another country, I think we would be looking at a general strike. And there's many reasons why that probably would never happen here. But I think if we take some of the lessons we learned from COVID about where our weaknesses are in the economy and our supply chain, we could be strategic. Like, what if the unions, the air traffic controllers, or all of the airlines were shut down, or the ports? You know, it's like one segment of the population could really bring the economy and thus the administration to its knees.
Yeah. I'm not sure that they would bring the administration to its knees, though, Brett. It might just piss off enough people that they actually get more support.
You don't think that if, you know, red state Americans who are turning a blind eye to a lot of what we're seeing started feeling it in new ways by not being able to travel or get their goods or any of the other disruptions?
I think they would just blame us.
They can ignore.
You know, you just imagine what Fox News would do with it. And that's not to say it shouldn't happen. And Fox News is going to do what they always do. You know, they're always going to vilify Democrats for whatever they do or say, pretty much no matter what. They're always going to praise the Republicans. But
what can we do? What can we do besides just for the next 8 months say, I can't believe he's doing this?
Well, you know, we need to point out what alternatives we offer. We need to point out how outrageous this is. I think that waking more and more people up, particularly independents, to this naked assault on our democracy, on the idea of democracy even. You know, the attacks on our right to vote, the attacks on our right to live in a society that is, you know, that has, you know, well-funded public schools and accessible health care. You know, we can point this stuff out easily. I mean, look at what's going on with the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies. You got 24 million people who are seeing their health insurance costs double and triple. You know, look at what's happening with Social Security. Trump laid off, or Musk laid off 7,000 or 8,000 people in the Social Security offices, and now it can take days to get through to Social Security if you've got a problem. You know, look at what's going on with Medicare. They've privatized more than half of Medicare, and people are literally dying because of this. You know, they're having their benefits turned down. The things that their doctors ordered turned down by insurance companies to increase their profits. You know, look at what's happening with women who are dying because of the abortion bans. We just had another one who died last week. This is the kind of stuff that I think we need to be constantly pointing out, Brett, to wake these people the hell up. Brett, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's a great question, and I realize my answer is nowhere near complete. But, you know, you start where you can start. It's 49.5 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 1 minute. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing that black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. And this is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s, and actually as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. But it was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. And this is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Lewis in Salisbury, North Carolina. Hey, Lewis, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing, man? I haven't talked to you since C-SPAN, when you was on C-SPAN.
Oh, my. Yeah, well,
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, look. Let me tell you what's happening here in North Carolina. It's sad, man. You remember when Helene, the hurricane, when it hit the western part of North Carolina, a lot of people lost their homes and lives and stuff, and Biden administration was doing his best to try to get aid to the people through FEMA.
Right.
So they made sure they got the trailers in, they made sure the roads and even, food and blankets, whatever, what FEMA do. But just recently, in the news yesterday, there was they interviewed this white woman who was living in one of those trailers. They about 200 square feet. They go up to like 400 square feet, depending on the family. But that's all the square feet you have. Don't you know now FEMA, that's no longer there because they gutted it, but FEMA, she said she woke up because somebody was knocking on her door and they were banging on her window, right? And she went to the door and said, what's wrong? And she said they shoved this piece of paper in her face. Now, she living in a FEMA trailer. And they said, this is an eviction notice. You have to leave tomorrow.
Whoa.
There's some that's going to be leaving this week. And they told her, if you want to keep this here FEMA trailer, it's going to cost you $3,000 a month.
Whoa. And this is because the Trump administration defunded FEMA?
Yes. And they said they're going to, if not, we'll take the trailer and we're going to auction it off.
Wow.
And then she was up here crying, saying what she's going to do. They already pulled off some people out of their trailers because they had to clear out land and put down septic tanks and light poles, photo trailers to be parked in for the people.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was so horrible. I was hurt of American that this administration is going to do this. Charity covers a multitude of sin. They already cut the USAID. Everything that a Democrat president have done, they already took it down.
Yeah, no, they're actively trying to reverse the New Deal in the Great Society. You're right, Lewis.
Most definitely, man. So I thought I want to let you know, and some of the listeners know, this is what this ex-FEMA doing to the people of North Carolina, or any disaster, I'm sure, they doing it to them as well.
Yeah, no, I know the people well, there's actually multiple states now, in addition to Puerto Rico, that are still waiting for FEMA money. Thanks for the information, Lewis. I appreciate it. Dave in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Got 2 points for you. This first one, it goes back to August of 2025. Of a new Hegseth leak reveals secret plan for years of troops on U.S. streets to help carry out Trump's immigration policies, according to a leaked memo written by Hegseth's brother, Phil, who worked inside the Pentagon as a liaison to the Department of Homeland Security and as a senior advisor to the Defense Secretary.
Right.
And in that latest document, obtained by the New Republic details plans for how the Trump administration could use the military to assist with domestic law enforcement as part of its mass deportation agenda for years, quotation, years to come. And then, forget about this thing called Posse Comitatus Act, tanking the economy and
no, they are willing to do just about anything to make America white again.
Yeah, well, this was back in August already, so 5-6 months ago he did that. And the second one, real quick, was saw a quiz at the beginning of the month on CNBC, back with the Venezuela thing, and saying besides Venezuela for largest oil reserve, there are 4 other countries: 1, Saudi Arabia; 2, Iran; 3, Canada; and 4 is Iraq. So now we know another reason why Trump wanted to make them the 51st state.
Oh, Canada's got a crap load of oil. Yeah.
Yeah, up by the Yukon or what. But that was surprising me. Why did they need Enbridge to pump the lines under the lake into Sarnia, Ontario, with that tar sands? And
yeah,
now they're...
I don't recall the details on that. I know they wanted to get it down across the central United States down to the Gulf Coast because the Koch brothers had a refinery down there that could handle that slurry.
Yeah, well, this stuff is at Enbridge Line 5 that Michigan and I've been fighting for the longest time.
Yeah.
Because they got them 2 20-inch pipes and they've had an anchor strike, so now they're talking about tunneling under the lake.
Wow.
But still, it's going to go to Ontario. We're not getting it. It's going all along the southern UP, and then it feeds it from Superior, Wisconsin, and then all the way. But anyway, thought I'd share them with you.
Yeah, the politics of oil. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. This thing that we've become addicted to, and Trump is doing everything he can to not just maintain but increase our addiction to these fossil fuels, which is nuts. Yeah. Dave, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. On the other side of the break, Miles Taylor is going to drop by. Well, he used to be the chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security. So get ready. This is going to get interesting. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Today is How to Get Rid of a President by David Preece. And this is from the chapter Rejected by the Party, starting on page 12, kind of mid-chapter. Presidents need not be thrown out at the polls on election day to find themselves dislodged from the White House. History shows us that a chief executive's own political allies can remove that incumbent when they perceive him as unpopular or unfit. Refusing to nominate a president for a second term, or better yet, getting the incumbent to realize that he should walk away before it becomes an embarrassing vote at the convention, does bring the party significant pain. But many politicians have calculated that discarding their own party's toxic president by internal action is better than waiting for the voters to do it. This dynamic remained absent for the first half century or so of American politics. George Washington, who didn't represent any formal party, set a precedent by stepping away from re-election after 2 terms. Successor after successor followed suit, keeping the support of their parties until they left office after 8 years. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Jackson lost the next election, both Adamses and Van Buren, or met the Grim Reaper, Harrison. John Tyler, if only in this one respect, was a trendsetter. He began a 6-president cascade of men who failed to appear on their party's ballot in the general election after their first term. One, Zachary Taylor, literally had no choice. Like Harrison, he died in office. The others, by staying alive through their 4-year terms, could have carried their party's banners again on Election Day. Not one did, as national agonizing over slavery and other tensions within each of the major parties made it difficult for any president to build and sustain a governing coalition. Of those 5 chief executives, only James Polk left with a solid reputation and a ledger of successes. He'd told Democrats upon his nomination in 1844, "I shall enter upon the discharge of the high and solemn duties of the office with the settled purpose of not being a candidate for re-election." And he stayed true to his word. It was just as well, only 3 months after what would have been his second inauguration, he died at the age of 53. The 3 presidents who followed Polk, the forgettable series of Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, shared 3 characteristics. First, historians routinely rank them among the nation's worst presidents. Second, and related to that, they took no responsibility for resolving the national moral failure of slavery. And third, no matter how they had attained office, they, like future presidents Chester Arthur and Lyndon Johnson, found themselves spurned by their own parties. The Whigs had learned in 1840 that a celebrity candidate seemed to have an easier route into the White House than a party regular. So in 1848, they nominated General Zachary Taylor, a recent hero of battlefields in the Mexican-American War. Despite his lack of solid political principles or any apparent passion for the job, just 2 years earlier he'd said with apparent sincerity, "I am not and never shall be an aspirant for that honor." Taylor won the election over Democratic candidate Lewis Cass. In July 1850, he became the second straight Whig general to president who couldn't make it to the next election alive. Vice President Millard Fillmore took his place. Fillmore had risen to prominence in New York's anti-Mason party dedicated to exposing and opposing Freemason fraternal organizations, but switched allegiance to the Whigs in the 1830s. In the first year and a half of the administration, inter-party rivals had manipulated Taylor better than Fillmore did, leaving him little to do but preside over the Senate and stew over his fate in a useless job. But as president, he was prepared to avenge perceived slights. Ahead of their expected dismissal, all the cabinet members whom Fillard had inherited from Taylor offered their resignations, which were quickly accepted by the new president. He asked them to remain in place for 1 month. They agreed to stay for 1 week. Fillmore would proceed to fire more previous political appointees than any of his successors had. More than half of those at the State Department, for example, had to find new jobs. The biggest development during Fillmore's presidency was the Compromise of 1850. This set of bills admitted California to the Union as a free state, allowed the organization of the Utah and New Mexico territories without reference to slavery, resolved both the Texas state boundary and the Lone Star State's remaining debt, abolished the slave trade in the District of Columbia, and reaffirmed the fugitive slave law that required the returning of slaves escaped across state lines. Fillmore signed each bill, believing this package of measures had fixed what he considered an annoying issue that kept getting in the way of his other priorities. The compromise bills delayed a war between the states, but at a cost. They not only perpetuated slavery, but split the Whigs further apart, as most Northerners refused to abide by the fugitive slave law. Congressional elections in November 1850 increased the Democratic opposition's majorities in both the House and the Senate. The rest of the president's term was so bad that the highlight might have been the start of Commodore Matthew Perry's voyage to Japan to open that country to American trade, even though he didn't arrive until Fillmore left office. Not long after rising to become the chief executive, Fillmore declared he wouldn't run again in the 1852 election. He reiterated that in 1851. But the trappings of presidential power and the pleas of his remaining party faithful convinced him to retract that pledge and make a late entry into the field of candidates. He portrayed his about-face as a noble personal sacrifice for the good of the party and the country. And during the spring of that election year, 8 Whig state conventions endorsed him. As delegates gathered for what a leading historian of the era calls the longest, most rancorous, and most debilitating Whig national convention ever to meet, the first tally had Fillmore in the lead. How to get rid of a president.
We say fight back!
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our Tuesday program. Here on the line with us is our buddy Miles Taylor, the former chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security, tech and security expert, the author of A Warning by Anonymous and Blowback. And his Substack is, it used to be Treason with Miles Taylor. Now it's defiance.news, Blue Sky Miles Taylor USA. Miles, welcome back to the program. Do I have it right that you've moved your Substack from treason to defiance?
Well, there was something, Tom, about the word defiance that signaled to me a more active fight against this administration rather than trying to expropriate Donald Trump's claims of treason against me. So short answer is yes. You can now find everything that we're doing at defiance.news, or folks can look up the organization at defiance.org. That website has everything we are doing each week to fight back against Donald Trump's abuses of power.
Great. And at defiance.news, it's completely free to sign up for the subscription, and I get it. It's a great newsletter. And in fact, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. But before I get to it, you're also a tech and security expert. I mean, that was your one of the things that made you valuable to the Department of Homeland Security, I'm assuming. I'm wondering what the status is right now, in your opinion, of Russian and Chinese infiltration of our cyber systems. Generally speaking, civilian systems that could be brought down. I know, for example, that the Russians at one point tried to take down a dam here in Oregon, and instead they took down a little tiny dam in New Hampshire. And that the Chinese, there's concerns that the Chinese have embedded their back doors basically in our telecommunications software. Where are we at with all that stuff?
Well, I mean, look, it's not good news, Tom. I mean, there's two words that define what a good U.S. government posture is to fight back and protect your digital lives. And those words are attribution and consequences. The U.S. government must be able to determine that the bad guys are infiltrating our networks, and they must be able to deliver consequences to punish them and deter them from doing that. On both accounts, the Trump administration is failing catastrophically. They have gutted the lead agency responsible for domestic cybersecurity protection, an agency I helped stand up at DHS in the first Trump term, an agency that was supported with a bipartisan vote across the Congress called CISA, the lead cybersecurity agency for the U.S. government. Well, Donald Trump doesn't like it. Why? Because one of the things that CISA does is protect U.S. elections infrastructure. And in 2020, when the head of CISA, my former colleague, came out publicly and said the elections were secure, Donald Trump was furious. He didn't want Chris Krebs to say that, and he fired him. Now, in a second term, he's taken that agency and decimated it as an act of revenge. But the consequence of that is the frontline defenders responsible for doing what you point to, Tom, preventing the Russians and the Chinese from infiltrating our networks, stealing our health records and our financial records and our state secrets, those people are no longer there. That agency is a shadow of its former self. So we are less able as a country to attribute and figure out if the bad guys are hitting us. And then on the other word I said, consequences, Donald Trump has shown he will not do anything to harm Vladimir Putin. And he has been very tepid on China because he wants President Xi to do his own thing in the East so Donald Trump can do his own thing in America's sphere of influence. So that has meant our two biggest foreign adversaries essentially have a get-out-of-jail-free card for attacking American networks, spying on Americans, and that's very, very, very bad news for this country.
So as a former senior official at the Department of Homeland Security, the Uber agency that oversees some 20 or 30 federal police agencies, investigative agencies, intelligence agencies, in your opinion, why is Donald Trump doing this? It certainly looks to me like Vladimir Putin owns him.
Well, look, The simplest explanation, in my view, Tom, is that Donald Trump always had a hostile disposition toward fellow democracies and a friendly disposition toward autocratic countries. And a lot of people scratched their heads about why that was in the first Trump administration. But the simple conclusion that I came to is in business, he learned that it was harder for him to cut deals and make money in democratic countries because there's rules, there's the rule of law, there are anti-corruption measures. It takes longer to get things done because there are safety valves to prevent people from engaging in acts of corruption. Donald Trump learned something very different about countries like Turkey or Russia. He learned it's easier to cut through the bureaucratic red tape, legally or illegally, and to develop relationships that help you get deals done and enrich yourself. He carried those biases into the American presidency. And that's why even the autocracies Donald Trump is fighting back against right now, like Venezuela and Iran, are places that he's doing it for personal reasons because their leaders have made fun of him. In other places, he's friendly with autocrats like Russia and China because they're good to him and he thinks he might be able to make deals there one day. That's what drives the president's mindset, is where can he go make money? Now, that's the simple explanation. As to whether the Russians have something more on him, I don't know. But I think Donald Trump sees the Russian government and Russian networks, financial networks, as really crucial to him and his family in the post-presidency.
Yeah, and maybe a place to live.
We can only hope.
Yeah, really. I'm curious also, when you were at the Department of Homeland Security during the first Trump administration, was there any discussion of the Epstein files?
No, I mean, there was nothing that came up when I was there about the issue, except only one thing, which is I came to learn when I was in the administration that Acosta, who was then Secretary of Labor, had previously been the person who was the prosecutor who gave Donald Trump that sweetheart deal. Now that was publicly known.
You mean
but
Epstein?
I found that's right.
Epstein,
that gave Epstein the sweetheart deal. I thought that was extremely unusual. That Trump, of all the people in the world he could pick for a cabinet post, he would pick that person for the role. Other people also found that very strange. There was another thing that was discussed among administration officials privately, which was Acosta's previous public remarks about how he had made that sweetheart Epstein deal because Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence. And people behind the scenes wondered what that meant, wondered why Acosta had made that comment. I never had conversations with Acosta about it. I've urged people in the years since to press him further, but that seems to still be a big question mark over all of this. And with the full of the Epstein files not yet released, we still don't know. Was there some U.S. government relationship from a national security or intelligence perspective with Jeffrey Epstein that has not yet been disclosed?
Yeah, he was certainly wired into Israel via Ehud Barak, and others.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple minutes left here, Miles, before we're going to hit a hard break. Your most recent piece, Red Alert, It's All Coming True. Basically, you go through all the things that you predicted would happen, and sure enough, here we are in the midst of this heavy turn toward neo-fascism. What do you see as the main issues that America is or are confronting right now? What are the things that wake you up at night?
Well, to me, it is the use of force. Folks have always worried about, is Donald Trump going to take over this agency or that agency or delete congressional programs? There is something that's a much bigger concern than that. And Donald Trump always knew what the source of power was inside the federal government, and that was force. And more specifically, he knew that people with badges and guns or camouflage uniforms and guns were the core source of his power as president of the United States. You are now seeing that viewpoint come to fruition with Donald Trump's deployment of the largest federal law enforcement agency now in America, ICE, into American communities to harass those communities and to intimidate state and locals, especially in blue states. And you're seeing it with his conversations about potentially invoking the Insurrection Act and his use of force abroad. This is going to be a theme of the next 3 years of the Trump presidency. Mark my words, his focus on expanding and growing ICE and using it as a cudgel to get what he wants on other issues, and him doing the same thing with the United States military. Why is that a bigger concern than all of the others? Well, that's how fascist regimes begin. They begin with consolidating the power over the use of force. Donald Trump is following that in textbook fashion, and there are not a whole lot of ways to stop him. Now, the big way would be Congress standing up. But unfortunately, Tom, your listeners and viewers are going to see that there's a debate in Congress over the next couple of weeks about the Department of Homeland Security budget. And it already sounds like Democrats have effectively thrown in the towel and capitulated. They're going to give the administration largely what it wants on the Department of Homeland Security budget. This is an agency. That's right. It's being turned into a grab and go Gestapo. And there needs to be a much firmer line about getting DHS to stop what it's doing. But that's what I worry about, is use of force at home and abroad.
Yeah, it seems. Are they still coming after you?
Well, we're still under investigation by the administration. We expect something could happen any day, but we're ready to fight back, Tom. I mean, whether it's the army of folks we've put together at defiance.org, or, you know, the people like you and others who've called to say, we're in this together, we're ready for whatever comes. And we are not going to let the administration send a message that people can be silenced with sham federal investigations.
There you go. Miles Taylor, former chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security. His book's A Warning and Blowback. His Substack is defiance.news, and it's free. Check it out. Sign up. Get it all in your email box. Miles, thanks again. It's always great talking with you.
Thanks, my friend.
Good. Yeah, thank you. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where despair is not an option. Stay with us. And welcome back. Bruce in Los Angeles. Hey, Bruce, what's up?
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, I just wanted to share with you at the last No Kings rally here in downtown L.A. back in October, my favorite sign that I saw underneath the most well-known phrase that Martin Luther King ever uttered, "I have a dream." There was a drawing of Dear Leader being led away in handcuffs.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Related to that, you know, recently Ralph Nader reminded the world that when Richard Nixon was being impeached, you know, he defied 2 congressional subpoenas, and that was enough for the Republicans to approach him and force him to resign.
Yeah, it was Barry Goldwater who walked over to the White House and said, "This is it, Dick."
Right. So, you know, Dear Leader, in his first term, defied congressional subpoenas over 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or at least members of his administration did, yes.
Well, you know, dozens at the least. You know, people should be throwing this in the faces of Republicans every moment. Because the Republicans in Congress are just, I mean, spineless cowards. I heard you earlier. You know, you reminded us about the death threats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mitt Romney said they wanted to vote to convict him in the Senate, but a number of Republican senators, their families were getting death threats, and so they decided to give Donald Trump a pass, which is, you know, you do not give the bully your lunch money. I mean, it's just, you know, rule number 1 from 3rd grade. Bruce, thank you. Well said. Good to hear from you. I appreciate it. Doug in Portland. Hey, Doug. Thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Glad to talk to you this morning. First off, I wanted to just say a shout out and a thank you to you and your audience and your guests and the late night comedians around and all the politicians trying to do the right thing. because these are trying times, I tell you, and it is really hard to keep your balance and do what you implore us to do. Is, you know, like, it's not a spectator sport. So just a big thank you. Wanted to ask your opinion about what the possibilities are to really impeach some of these people and what you think might happen if we win the House, which I think is possible, certainly, and maybe the House of the Senate, which is not likely, but not out of the question.
Yeah.
And wondering about whether I think it would be great to have a group impeachment. I mean, if he can pardon dozens and hundreds of people.
I agree.
You know,
impeach the entire bunch of them in his cabinet. I don't think that we're going to see any real substantial forward motion on any of these until after the Republican primaries, which means that, you know, in all probability, we'll start peeling off Republican votes in May, June, July, mostly June, July, August. But I think
leading up to the election, then
after the primary elections, yeah, because that is the sort of Damocles that Trump holds. That's the thing that he can bring down on the neck of Republican politicians, is the threat to primary them. Once they've won their primaries and they just have to worry about a Democrat, you know, they're not going to face Trump again in 2028, and they know it. And so I think you're going to see some significant defections. I hope, anyway. Doug, thanks a lot for the call. I realize Joe Walsh disagrees with me, but I think it's right. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. There is a long history of right-wing, conservative, Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices becoming liberals, or at least becoming reasonable. Earl Warren is probably the best-known example. He was, you know, a right-wing governor of California. He was a hard-ass Alameda County prosecutor, a district attorney, and you know, when Eisenhower put him on the court, a year later, he did the Brown versus Brown v. Board of Education case. He ended discrimination, you know, racial discrimination in schools, or at least, you know, tried to end it. So why are Republican billionaires now sucking up to conservative members of the Supreme Court? In my opinion, it's not a quid pro quo. They're not trying to get specific votes on specific issues. They're trying to prevent them from doing what Earl Warren did, which is waking up and voting for the benefit of America rather than just their patrons. There's a whole piece about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Christy in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Hey, Christy, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. Well, first of all, thank goodness for Miles Taylor. If only there were more people from the first administration who were as full-throated as he is.
Yep.
Anyway, so I'm really calling because, like a lot of people have said, I don't know if we can wait for the midterms or trust that they will be free and fair. So I have an idea to try to take back the House before the midterms, and that is if anybody lives in the district of a vulnerable U.S. congressperson, they should pound the crap out of them by phone, the 5-call app, email, social media, protesting, whatever they have, to try to convince them that, number one, they're going to lose spectacularly in the fall. Number two, it's largely Mike Johnson's fault. He has been screwing them over all year long. Number three, they could get even with Mike Johnson by making him lose his gavel before the year is over. So number four, they should follow Marjorie Taylor Greene's lead and quit Congress now.
Yeah.
Only 4 or 5 of them have to quit. I've lost track of how many.
I think right now only 2 or 3 would have to quit.
Right, but you know, if Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat gets retaken by
it'll be back. Yeah,
you know, that goes back up. But anyway, you know, if a few of them could walk out the door now, give Mike Johnson the finger, and we could take back the gavel and at least put speed bumps in their way. You know, we might not be able to fix the world, but at least we can put speed bumps in their way. We can ensure that the elections in the fall are free and fair. You know, and some of them have already announced that they're not running again. So So they might be particularly susceptible to the idea.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them who have,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Given how slim this margin is, I guess if you're a Republican member of Congress and you do something that's going to screw the party, which resigning early would be, that probably eliminates the possibility that you're going to get $1 million a year job as a lobbyist, calling on your fellow Republicans.
Or a spot on Fox News.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm guessing that economic self-interest is the primary driver here, but who knows? Charlotte, thank you. Thank you for listening to WAUK, and thanks for a thoughtful comment. Mark in Wheaton, Illinois. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to comment on the immigration policy. And, a couple of thoughts that I have on it. Despite the daily videos we see of car windows being smashed and people dragged out of their cars and protesters being assaulted, I still see people commenting on social media defending ICE and saying things like protesters should mind their own business and let ICE do their job. The immigrants are here illegally taking our jobs.
Yeah, these are authoritarians.
Yeah, but no one talks about the fact that American employers for decades looked the other way and eagerly hired people here illegally, despite the fact, my understanding, that that's illegal to do.
Prior to Reagan's reforms in 1986, we used to arrest white employers. And that's why the meatpacking industries and the construction industries were entirely unionized, or almost entirely unionized. But Reagan stopped the enforcement of that, and it never really got picked up again. Which is bizarre, but I'm frankly surprised no Democrats ever went after employers. But you're absolutely right. The employers are the giant magnet. Mark, thank you for that. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truth, multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know. I'll be right back with you. Book today is Can We All Be Feminists? It's a collection of essays edited by Jane Eric Udori. This first chapter, or first essay, is from Charlotte Shane. It's called No Wave Feminism. If you feel like feminism is failing you, you're not alone. I sometimes have the impression that I'm as thoroughly feminist as I am thoroughly human. The feminism is as intrinsic to my contribution to my constitution as my skeleton is to my body. But in my 35 years, I've struggled with or outright rejected feminism on several occasions. First, as an ignorant adolescent, what do women need feminism for if they already got the vote? Then, as a sex worker who saw how regularly and even gleefully feminists stoked the public's long-standing antipathy toward professionally sexual women. And now, again, as someone moving even further into the far left, who cannot abide the forms of feminism that embrace and are complicit with the worst aspects of liberalism. The more I learn about the intersecting oppressive forces that continue to shape the Western world, colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, xenophobia, and racism, and the network of cruel social machinery to which these systems give rise, incarceration, crippling debt, disenfranchisement, deportation, and so on, the less sense it makes to use gender as the primary lens through which to regard human-engineered suffering. Feminism doesn't feel like the sharpest weapon to wield against white supremacy or border policing, for instance, or even the best tool with which to approach basic civic concerns like vibrant schools. That's not because those issues don't impact women. Obviously, they directly and indirectly impact many, but they don't necessarily impact women more or in dramatically different ways than they do men. In other words, the most significant challenges these issues present aren't tethered to one's sex, and so prioritizing gender above other aspects of identity limits one's realm of ethical responses. Here's an example. American prisons often keep female prisoners shackled while they give birth. There are variations on the theme. Some women are shackled during labor, some are unshackled, but then shackled again almost immediately afterward. And almost all are shackled while heavily pregnant. There's some variation of what shackling entails, too.
It can mean being cuffed at the wrists or at the ankles, or both, or cuffed to a hospital bed or chained at the waist. Articulating these details makes the sadism even starker. A class action federal lawsuit in 2017 alleged more than 40 women at the Milwaukee County Jail suffered this horror. It was preceded by lawsuits in 2014 and 2016 against that same jail for similar practice. But the appalling practice is hardly confined to one city or one state. In 2015, New York prisons were found to be shackling prisoners in labor in spite of a state law that made it illegal to do so. And according to a 2016 report by the Prison Birth Project and Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, jails and prisons in Massachusetts were guilty of similar violations. Most feminists probably agree that this is a feminist issue. The topic accordingly receives coverage on feminist websites and sometimes in women's magazines. But does a feminist obligation to attend to the rights of the imprisoned extend only as far as pregnancy and labor? Or is it a feminist issue when a non-pregnant woman is shackled? Or when she is caged for years and exploited for her labor, denied face-to-face visits from loved ones, held captive in a compound in the name of, quote, justice? If the answer to these questions is yes, then it is also a feminist issue. Then is it also a feminist issue when men are shackled during various health emergencies, seizures, say? In 2014, a male inmate in Colorado died after undergoing several seizures while in restraints and receiving no medical treatment. Is it a feminist issue when incarcerated men are denied the right to visit with family or exploited for their labor? Is it a feminist issue when so many men are raped while in prison? Or does feminism's responsibility begin and end with gender-based mistreatment? The feminists hired by prominent media outlets often advocate for measures that would result in higher levels of incarceration. They write op-eds in favor of further criminalization around sex work and call for longer prison sentences for men convicted of assault, which we've known for decades is not necessarily synonymous with men who committed the crime. They also disturbingly relish the theater of sentencing, like that enacted by Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who told serial sexual abuser Larry Nassar that if she could, she would allow some or many people to do to him what he did to others. So sexual violation is an atrocity unless it happens to the right person. They capitalize on women's justified fear and anger around mistreatment by men to shore up the status quo, to suggest that our current problems are not the result of fundamentally unjust institutions, but rather institutions that are only incidentally sexist. That means that those same institutions could become less so with the right adjustments, like more draconian sentencing for crimes against women, or more female judges. But the prison system is racist and brutal by design, not by accident or mismanagement, just as the court system regularly fails the most vulnerable because it was built to protect the powerful. The challenge of the 21st century is not to demand equal opportunity to participate in the machinery of oppression, revolutionary thinker Angela Davis has written. Rather, it is to identify and dismantle those structures. Yet leveraging our existing legal system for criminalization remains the go-to strategy for most feminists when it comes to dealing with objectionable behavior. The book, Can We All Be Feminists?
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled, Trump Lost, Vote Suppression 1 at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
You ever watch a storm roll in? The kind that don't just shake the windows, but rattles the bones of the whole damn country. Yeah, that storm's got a name, and it ain't democracy. She thought she was safe in the crowd, wrapped in the roar of a mob made loud, mistaking fury for friendship, mistaking chaos for cheers. But the same booster march beside you will trample you when you fall out of line. 'Cause in the land of the loyal, fear ain't a symptom, it's the design. The MAGA machine doesn't debate, it hunts. They don't argue, don't reason, don't care what you want. It smells betrayal like blood in the water. And once you slip, it drags you under.
Perfect song to follow Miles Taylor there, because the MAGA machine has gone full tilt boogie against him. Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Kathy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm just reading, some headlines coming out of Davos, and we are getting creamed.
Oh, we're getting ridiculed, I'll tell you that. And Danish member of Parliament this morning went to the floor of Parliament and said, let me speak to you in terms you will understand, Mr. Trump, F you, only he said the word that I can't say on the radio. He was reprimanded for it, but I mean, the world is pissed right now, Kathy. They're freaked out.
Really pissed. And the Danes, the head of a huge Danish pension fund came out this morning and said they're divesting all their U.S.
That's right.
treasuries.
$25 billion. Yep. They're pulling it out of the United States.
And you know what I'm tripping into is when the whole movement started for divesting South Africa, investments in South Africa, and against apartheid back in the 80s. I know it was a hard, long slog, but it worked. It brought pressure to bear. I was working with a labor organization that was a big part of that movement, and I remember when it succeeded. And Nelson Mandela came back to the States, and we were part of the host group that was there. And it was just an absolutely joyous moment. But there will be suffering in the United States, if particularly Europe unites against us. And people got to stop being so arrogant that we're impervious to things like that. We are absolutely not.
Yeah, excellent point. The former head of Greenpeace International, and I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but he was a black South African and just a wonderful guy. And when I lived in D.C., he came through visiting, and we spent the afternoon together. And he was telling me these wild stories about what happened during the apartheid time and how successful those boycotts were. And so, you're absolutely right, Kathy. It can bring some considerable pain to a country, and we're now in the crosshairs, because we've got this madman running our country. It's nuts. Kathy, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to us there in Madison. Stephen in Seattle. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
I wanted to say that we're obviously in a dire situation right now, but for folks that think too often that the Democrats are the answer, they're really a placebo, because the oligarchy is the real enemy. And Trump is their errand boy, and they use his narcissism to dictate policy through an executive branch gone berserk. The Dems and Republicans are both the oligarchy's foot soldiers and are two cheeks of the same ass, but one of them is certainly far less attractive than the other one. But voting.
So what's your solution then, Stephen?
I've got a few of them. One is we've got to get Citizens United. I'm not alone in that. That's pretty low-hanging fruit. We've got to get rid of Citizens United. But a lot of people don't realize that the all-time record-holding campaign for most monies raised and most individual donations prior to the billionaire fest that Trump just subjected us to in 2024 was a losing presidential campaign that ironically lacked the time between the end of the primaries and the general to raise funds, which is a significant amount of time, and eschewed corporate donations. Do you know which campaign that was?
No.
Bernie Sanders. And when Sanders supporters launched a class action suit against the DNC in the wake of that election before putting their fingers on the scale for their preferred candidate, as they also did in 68 and in 2024, all three elections were lost. The DNC's lawyers successfully prevailed in court by arguing that they were a private organization and weren't required to run a fair fight, and the judge agreed.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with this, Stephen. I just, this is not a moment in time when I find it, frankly, and thanks for the call, when I find it, frankly, useful to just sit around trash-talking Democrats. I am very familiar with the problems that my party has, but I'm moving on from there. John in Sebring, Florida. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello. There was a TV show that was old in black and white. It was called Track Down. And there was one episode of it where there was a guy named Trump who came to town to save the town from a meteor shower by building a magical wall that only he can build.
Oh, I remember this. We all learned about this. This was from, must have been the early 50s. Because I missed it as a kid altogether. I learned about this, back 10 years ago when Trump was first running for office, and somebody found the old clips of that thing, and it became, for about 3 days, it was a hot thing on the internet.
Yeah. There's another one made by the Army, Don't Be a Sucker.
Yep.
Where it talks about the divide and conquer and we're the real.
That was from the 40s. That was during World War II. Yeah, that's a good one, and you can find that on YouTube. Just plug in "Don't Be a Sucker, U.S. Army." It should pop right up. Yeah, no, there was some good stuff back in the day. Well, we had a consensus across America, prior to the Reagan administration, I would say, and really prior to Trump, that dictators were bad. That tyranny and dictatorship and oligarchy and autocracy were not the American way. And of course, now you've got an entire political party that has decided to bend down and kiss the ass of a guy who wants to be emperor, or thinks he's emperor, and a bunch of cucks, a bunch of these beta men who are, yeah, we're Republicans. We do whatever Trump tells us to do. Yeah, we'll protect the pedophiles, no problem. I mean, it's pathetic, John. John, thank you for pointing that out. Jim in Columbia, South Carolina. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. First-time call. I've been listening for a while. I had two ideas I wanted to run by you. The first one, I think you guys were talking about it last week, but I missed it. I live downtown Columbia, and we had the Tibetan monks that came through from Texas going up to D.C.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, my wife and I took soccer chairs out there, and I thought there'd just be a couple people behind them. Well, it turned out there was probably about 2,000 or 3,000 people behind them when they got to where we live, and then another 4 or 5 or so, I'd say. It's hard to estimate. We won the national championship in women's basketball, and anyway, that crowd was about 10,000 people back, a couple of years ago. And when you got up to the State House, our capital, the crowd was at least that big. I think it was around probably 8 to 10,000.
Oh, that's marvelous.
And so my thought was, this whole march, and this is a ruby red state, as you know. This is a blue dot city in a ruby red state, but the whole march had people from all walks of life, and it was completely apolitical, very quiet, people just supporting these guys because it's one hell of a journey. And I know they picked up steam as they keep going north. Would it make sense to get an Indivisible or somebody to try to get, tens of thousands of people behind them when they get to D.C., just to show that across political spectrums, people really are into peace, for lack of a better word. It was a very uplifting experience. So that's one idea.
They have not yet arrived in D.C., right?
No, they're in North Carolina. And that's
we should reach out to them and get somebody from there.
It'll take a while, and then they got to walk through Virginia, which is going to take a while.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think here was like the halfway point, somewhere like that.
That's interesting. Well, Sean's going to see if she can reach out to them. We'll see what we can find out. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jim. Good. Appreciate the tip. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just 1 minute. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back. Stick around. And welcome back. Jim in St. Louis. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Tom, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call. And I was listening to Donald Trump earlier today, and he's talking about 2,000 companies that he's going to be bringing back in the United States, businesses, this, that, all these companies coming back. We're the greatest country on the earth. Mr. Hartmann, he had 4 years from 2016 to 2020 to bring these jobs back. He didn't bring one job back.
And he's lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 11 months.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and then since around 1990, he's lost about 20 million jobs and everything. But I just say, and then he brought up about Minnesota again. He had these pictures of these guys and all these killers and that. Well, I heard last week in Minnesota he only had 2 murders in the last since the first year. You're the emeritus senator from Minnesota's line or Donald Trump's line. You know, he ought to be fact checked. And I'll bring one more thing up, Mr. Hartmann, and to relate to your listeners. I was sitting in a conversation back in 1968, and my father was talking to this gentleman who was moving his company out of the St. Louis area, and he said, "Tom, why are you moving your company out here?" He said, "Oh, it's because it's just so much cheaper." And that was his answer. And he said, "Well, Tom, people need these jobs. They need these jobs." And since 1960, there was no such thing as welfare in 1968. Now we got about 75 million people on welfare in this country. And the people that get up and go to work every day, it's costing them a fortune. So basically,
well, the average person who earns around $60,000 a year, which is, I think the average actual median income for individual workers is around 47, but household income is around 65 or 70. So $60,000 a year, you are paying about $4,000 a year in taxes that are being used to subsidize major corporations and billionaires, and you are paying $28 a year to subsidize people on welfare. So, Jim, I think you've got the wrong villains in mind. Richard in Houston, Texas. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, so let me get this straight. Renee Good is a domestic terrorist, but Ashley Babbitt is a patriot.
That's
now,
right. In fact, they gave her family $5 million.
Oh, I know. I'm hip. Here's what I haven't heard enough of, and this is not a stretch. This is not an exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. They'd both be alive today. They do have one thing in common. They'd both be alive today if it wasn't for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
And if the Senate would have done their job back in 2019, the first impeachment. Of course, that's just 2 of many that would be alive. But if I can, before I go, I'd like to plug the protest I just left. Next Tuesday, it's every Tuesday in front of John Cornyn's office in Houston, 5,300 from 11:30 to 1. And next Tuesday will be our 9-year anniversary. I just found out it about a year ago, and I've been going to almost...
For 9 years you've been protesting in front of John Cornyn's office every Tuesday?
They have, the protesters. Wow. I just found out about it a year ago, and I've been to almost every one for the last year, simply because I've retired since then. But yeah, if I could plug it, please come out. We had like over 40 people protesting today, and we usually average around 29 or 30. So
that's
please,
marvelous.
Anybody that wants to come out and protest, 5300 Memorial, Houston, Texas, 77007, and 11:30 to 1. And please.
How's Cornyn doing in that primary?
He's a few points below Paxton, and as much as I can't stand either one of them, and as much as I want to think politics that Paxton would be the best one to beat, I thought the same thing about Trump back in 2016.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Richard, I got to run. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, you know, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back, 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Pat in Atlanta. Hey, Pat, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Actually, it's my third call.
Okay.
I love your show.
Thank you.
I love your show, actually. Okay, I was in a group. We were talking about, you know, the Supreme Court and how we could possibly change that. And looked at, said, you know, how could the Supreme Court ever be, you know, can they be impeached and whatnot? Mm-hmm. And found this Article 2, Section 4 in the Constitution that states exactly that. And so it says the president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
Correct.
And it says Supreme Court justices are considered civil officers under, you know, of the United States, so they fall under this provision.
That's right.
Why aren't we talking about this? Does this not mean anything?
It's only happened once, to the best of my knowledge, in the history of the United States. That was Samuel Chase in like 1806 or something. I mean, it was like during the Jefferson presidency, as I recall. Chase was a severe alcoholic and an abusive man, and everybody hated him. And they impeached him in the House of Representatives. They did not convict him in the Senate, and he continued and stayed on the bench, you know, until the day he died, or until close to it. But that's it. I mean, you know, impeaching Supreme Court justices, there was a concerted effort in the late 50s and early 60s that was largely funded by Fred Koch, the father of the Koch brothers, to impeach Earl Warren, because he wrote the decision, the unanimous decision in Brown versus Board of Education that ended school segregation and reversed, Plessy versus Ferguson. And but to the best of my knowledge, that's the only genuinely, you know, sincere, well-funded national effort to impeach. And that never got even, you know, to the best of my knowledge, there was never even a vote on that in the House of Representatives. So it's a damn hard thing to do, Pat, is the bottom line.
I mean, everything that's going on, all the awful things his administration's doing.
You would think, you know, with Clarence Thomas taking bribes and John Roberts' wife taking $10 million from fancy high-end law firms that argue before the court, and Sam Alito taking, you know, these expensive vacations and first-class airfare and all that. You would think that, and what's her name, Amy Coney Barrett, not recusing herself in cases where her father's oil company is, you know, Brett Kavanaugh, we still don't know who paid off his gambling debts, and Neil Gorsuch got this sweetheart land deal. You would think that somebody at some point would have raised enough hell about this, but no, it just hasn't happened. But I'm with you, Pat. The Supreme Court, this Supreme Court, or the Republicans on the Supreme Court anyway, are just extraordinarily corrupt. Pat, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's so nice to hear from you. Appreciate it. Mark in Darrington, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, great job, Professor. As fast as I can. I know it's not Friday, but I was curious about the solar wind that's hitting us. It started hitting us last night, and solar flare.
Right. I was going to get up last night and look for the aurora borealis, and I completely forgot. I'm going to have to set an alarm tonight if it's still the same thing.
Yeah, I'll let you explain what a really bad one can do. I was just curious if this was a one-off or if something is going on.
Well, this is, solar flares sometimes produce solar winds when they strike our planet, and they ionize the particles in the upper atmosphere and, cause them to acquire an electric charge. And that can be disruptive to communications. It alters the ionosphere, the nature of it. It can help or hinder things like ham radio transmissions, and it can mess with satellites. And but I haven't heard of any disruptions as a consequence of this one. Just that it's lighting up the northern lights. Have you?
Yeah, well, from what I've studied on this, is a really bad one can knock out power for 10 years, which is an argument for wind.
Yeah, not 10 years.
You never hear about geothermal.
Yeah, we actually had a bad one. We had a bad one back in the 80s or 90s that took down the power grid in, as I recall, in New York State.
Right.
But it took it down, and then, it just was a matter of a few hours before it came back up again. And I think there was a kind of lesson learned, because that just wash of ions, hit, basically added to the power that was in the grid to the point that it just started blowing breakers. They have since come up with ways to harden the grids against these things. I think the big danger, I mean, maybe in third world countries, your power grids, would be hit by it.
And Texas.
Yeah. Well, Texas is a third world country
I had to
for all
get that
practical
in there.
purposes. No, I get it, Mark. But I think the biggest danger is to the satellites. And but I haven't heard that this one is that bad. So, Mark, thanks for the call. It's nice to hear from you. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe. Get out there, get some exercise, and I will catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.